Chapter 161, An Evil Soul. How may I address you, Mr. Ma Tiansheng was currently all smiles. The previous horrible impression that Ling Han had given him was completely swept aside, of course. This was a grand customer that was able to produce alchemical pills close to Earth grade. What other person could do such a thing in the whole of Rain Country? Absolutely none. Ling Han. You may address me as young Master Han, Ling Han replied. Ma Tiansheng involuntarily wiped off sweat from his forehead. He did not want to address a young man as young master even one bit, but Ling Han was indeed a very important customer. If he offended Ling Han and Ling Han decided not to commission the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction off the alchemical pills on his behalf, then he'd really be in deep, deep trouble. Young Master Han, he could only do as Ling Han had said and address him as young master. Then, he said, please follow me. I shall help young Master Han take care of the procedures for registration. All right, Ling Han agreed with a nod. The news that 9 alchemical pills close to Earth grade had appeared at Spirit Treasures Pavilion very quickly reached the ears of the higher-ups. Very soon, an old man dressed in embroidered robes appeared and received Ling Han respectfully. Then, he introduced himself. I am the 3rd elder of this pavilion. My surname is Jia, and my name is Jia Ba Yun. Senior Jia, Ling Han greeted him, raising his clasped hands in respect. This old man was a spiritual pedestal tier elite, and more than deserved his respectful greeting. Young friend, are you intending to auction these foundation building pills here, or directly sell them off to our pavilion? Jia Ba Yun asked. Ling Han smiled faintly, and answered, auction. Such alchemical pills were used to assist one to break through to the next level, so it was of course best to auction them off in order to maximize their price. Jia Ba Yun looked a little disappointed at this. If the foundation building pills were directly sold to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, they'd be able to auction a single pill every few years. Firstly, this would help to increase the reputation of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, and secondly, rare items were always the most expensive. This would allow the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to obtain the highest amount of profit from these foundation building pill. Unfortunately, this brat was not that foolish. However, 9 foundation pills would definitely be auctioned off for an astronomical figure. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be earning more than enough from the commission alone. Young friend, if a customer commissions the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction items, we usually charge a commission fee of 15%. However, because the foundation building pills are much too valuable, I can make the decision to lower the commission fee to 14%. How does that sound? Jia Ba Yun asked, smiling. How ruthless, they actually had such a high commission rate. Lu Yutong was pouting at one side. The value of 9 foundation building pills was definitely above 100 million, and this commission fee of 14% would be over 1 million silver coins, far above the monthly net profit of the Lu clan. However, Jia Ba Yun was already generous enough to actually cut 100,000 out of the commission of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Of course, this was also because the value of the foundation building pill was really too high. All right, Ling Han nodded. Money was not something that he attached a lot of importance to, anyways. Jia Ba Yun smiled, and continued, if you want these foundation building pills to be sold for a good price, the best option would be to auction them over a few auctions. If young friend is not in a hurry to use money, why not use this small scheme? The more the foundation building pills could be sold for, the higher the earnings of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be. Thus, Jia Ba Yun would naturally want to use a scheme that could earn the most profit for the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Ling Han shook his head, and replied, I want them all to be auctioned off in a single auction. Jia Ba Yun was stunned for a moment, then sighed. The pills belonged to Ling Han after all, so even if he was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier, he could only make suggestions and offer advice. To Ling Han, the foundation building pill was something that he could easily concoct, so he would naturally not care if it would be auctioned off for a good price or a better price. In the end, it would definitely be an astronomical price anyways. Worst case scenario, he'd concoct a few other alchemical pills close to Earth grade a few days later, and would still be able to earn a lot of money anyways. All right. This is your letter of proof. When the pills are sold, young friend can bring this along with you to withdraw your funds. You may also endorse someone else to do it for you. However, please take note if the letter of proof is lost, please make sure to immediately report the loss here. Otherwise, if someone else withdrew the money earned without your approval, there is nothing even I can do, Jia Bayun warned. This token was split into half, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Ling Han each held one half. The two halves could be joined together seamlessly. Both Jia Bayun and Ling Han left a handprint on their own half. This would help prevent any possibility of anyone using false identities. Young friend, if you have other such pills in the future, why not come auction them off at our Spirit Treasures Pavilion again? As for the commission fee, it can still be discussed further, Jia Bayun said. All right. Ling Han agreed decisively. Ling Han and his companions left the Spirit Treasures Pavilion right after. As for Fan Dongping, he naturally would not get a good end. Ling Han did not need to worry himself over it. Even if Fan Dongping was a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, his crime involved an exorbitantly high sum of over 100 million. It would be very difficult for him to escape the death sentence. Who asked him to be so greedy? It was already quite late, so Ling Han headed to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, bringing Lu Yutong and Hunyao with him. The three of them slowly strolled through the streets. Hunyao ran all over the place. Whether it was lollipops or cotton candy or anything else, as long as it was something new, she wanted to give it a try. Thus, by the time they arrived at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, the sky was already completely dark. Mr. Ling, this way please. Yun Shuang had already been waiting inside, and when she saw Ling Han's figure, she immediately stepped out to receive him. They arrived at a side courtyard. When Yun Shuang pushed open the door and entered, they saw Lady Yan helping out a youth and coming out to receive them. Lady Yan said, "We are honored by your presence, Mr. Ling. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Ling Han looked at the two, and said, "That's all right. It is not convenient for Lady Yan as well, so I understand your difficulty. This should be your son, am I right? He has been sleeping for quite a number of years, so his body should still be very weak." "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Ling," Lady Yan said with a smile. She turned and said to the youth by her side, "Tian'er, this is your life-saving benefactor. Aren't you going to greet your big brother Ling?" "Big brother Ling," the youth immediately called. His face was extremely pale, and he spoke in a weak voice. "Mr. Ling, this is my son. His name is Yan Tianzhao," Lady Yan introduced to Ling Han. Then she took a look at Lu Yutong, and could not help but smile. Mr. Ling is indeed very fortunate to actually be able to obtain the favor of the princess of the Lu clan. Instantly, Lu Yutong's face reddened, yet her positive impression of Lady Yan improved even further. She liked listening to such words. Come and sit down first." Lady Yan guided the others into the side courtyard. There was already a delicious feast laid out, and around them, there were 8 very beautiful female attendants holding onto lanterns. As the light from these lanterns flickered gently, it was a very uniquely enchanting scene. They all sat down in their respective seats, according to their status as host and guests. Lady Yan naturally took the main seat, and on her left sat her son. Yun Shuang was seated next to him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was seated on Lady Yan's right, with Hunyao beside him, and lastly, Lu Yutong. "Big sister Lu, you are really pretty," Yan Tianzhao praised. A faint blush rose up on his pale face, as if he was being shy. If it had been a young man saying such words, Lu Yutong would not be very happy. However, firstly, Yan Tianzhao was only a teen around 15 to 16 years old, and secondly, she was elated to be praised like this in front of Ling Han. Thus, her good impression of this youth also improved greatly. Of course, that was the affection that an elder sister had for a younger brother. Ling Han only smiled at this. His eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, and a cold feeling rose up in his heart. This was not fear, but loathing, an extreme kind of loathing. It was as if there was an incomparably evil soul hiding within the body of this youth, causing a deep loathing to inexplicably rise up in his heart. He turned to look at Hu Niu and saw that when the little girl's eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, her little face involuntarily stiffened, and she bared her teeth. Obviously, Hu Niu had also sensed the evil nature in him. Ling Han could not help but be immersed in deep thought. The permanent pill would be able to awaken a person who had been trapped in deep slumber. The important thing now was, why had Yan Tianzhao fallen asleep in the first place? From the clues that Lady Yan Yunshuang had revealed, Yan Tianzhao should have been sleeping for about 10 years. At that time, had he started sleeping because of some kind of illness? Or had he committed some great crime, which caused an unknown elite martial artist to entrap his spirit and force him to sleep for such a very long time? That was the question. Chapter 162, Yan Tianzhao. Yan Tianzhao kept up a display of bashfulness and would frequently blush throughout their meal. When Lady Yan saw this, she felt both heartache and fondness. This also increased the positive feelings that Lu Yutong and Yun Shuang felt for him, who both doted on him like he was their little brother. But precisely because of his display, the coldness in Ling Han's heart grew even further. But, with the indulgent love that Lady Yan was showing for him, if Ling Han actually declared something like eliminating him at this moment, then she would definitely become hostile on the spot and suppress him like some kind of terrible monster. Ling Han would never underestimate the insane and extreme lengths that a mother would go to for her child. Moreover, this was only an intuitive feeling of his. Unless he had reached a point where he was invincible. Then, as long as he thought so, he would be able to do as he wished, with no need to care for what others would think of his actions. The unfortunate thing was, he was only in the 7th layer of element gathering tier now. Big brother Ling, why do you look a bit moody? Yan Tianzhao suddenly asked Ling Han, a hint of a smile flickering at the corners of his lips, his gaze deep. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face as he asked, what do I have to be moody about? Mr. Ling has Miss Lu to accompany him by his side. How could he possibly be unhappy? Lady Yan pursed her lips in a tender laugh. She was the lady boss of an entertainment business, so she was naturally rather outspoken in her speech. Lu Yutong immediately reddened at her words, but a hint of delight flickered in her eyes. She turned to glance at Ling Han, but when she saw that he looked extremely composed, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. I have not yet congratulated Big Brother Ling. When will you be getting married with Big Sister Yutong? Yan Tianzhao asked in a very innocent-looking manner. This brat was indeed strange. Or so Ling Han thought secretly. When Yan Tianzhao fell asleep, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. Then, now that he was awake, he should only have the limited intelligence of a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and would need to recover for some time before his intelligence would catch up with others within the same age range as he. But, just looking at the way he was speaking now, who would believe that this youth had been asleep for over 10 years? However, Lady Yan, Lu Yutong, and Yun Shuang all did not notice this discrepancy. Even if they had noticed, they'd most likely think that this brat was a genius who could immediately adapt and get used to having a normal life. Then he'd just have to see exactly how strange this brat was. Ling Han smiled. This youth did not even have a sliver of cultivation on him, so why was there need for him to be afraid? He had already mentioned it before. He only sensed a very discomforting feeling from this Yan Tianzhao, as if there was an incomparably evil soul hidden within the youth's body that incited disgust from him. Lady Yan, it's best to serve more food. This little girl is a true glutton, Ling Han said with a laugh, pointing at Hu Niu, who had already begun scarfing down the food. Lady Yan and Yun Shuang were both astonished. How could such a tiny little child have such a terrifyingly huge appetite? It's a good thing to be able to eat, Lady Yan said with a smile. But, she can eat too well. I'm about to be driven into poverty by her humongous appetite, Ling Han sighed. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong rolled her eyes at his words. This guy earned over 100 million in a few moments. No matter how big a glutton Hunyo was, she would not be able to catch up to the rate he was earning money at. And he still dared to moan about being poor. What an actor. With Lady Yan's command, a large amount of food was served one after another. Hunyo did not refuse any dish, and eventually decided not to use chopsticks anymore but rather her bare hands to grab the food. She moved at such a quick speed that Lady Yan and the others all looked shocked at the speed at which she could eat. They had seen people who could eat a lot, but those who could eat so much, they had definitely never seen before. Yan Tianzhao stared at Hunyo for a moment longer, and a smile involuntarily appeared on his lips. She was obviously very intrigued by her. However, Hunyo was a very sensitive little girl, and she immediately raised her head to glare at him. Her gaze was filled with ferocity and killing intent, causing his already pale face to pale a few shades further. Aside from Ling Han, no one else noticed this little episode. Because, just like no one would think that Yan Tianzhao possessed an evil soul, naturally no one would think that such a tiny, little girl like Hunyo would have any ability to harm others. They would only think that she was a big eater. Yan Tianzhao very quickly discovered Ling Han's gaze on him, and offered up a friendly smile. Meanwhile, Ling Han gave him a very meaningful look, causing the smile on Yan Tianzhao's face to slowly fade and hidden depths to appear in his eyes. This did not look anything like a youth of merely 15 to 16 years old, what more one that had been in a coma for over 10 years and had just been awake for a few days. Please accept this cherishing flower command, Mr. Ling. Lady Yan gifted him with an intricately carved jade plaque that was carved into the shape of a flower. The holder of this plaque would not only be able to enjoy a 20% discount in Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but can also come without any kind of reservations. There are a few side courtyards that have been set aside specifically for extremely honored customers like Mr. Ling. Ling Han received the plaque, smiled and said, "Thank you, Lady Yan." Overall, both hosts and guests quite enjoyed this feast. Of course, the happiest person was definitely Hunyo. She had eaten so much that her little tummy was slightly rounded. But, when one considered the fact that she had eaten so much food, and yet her tummy was only slightly rounded from the colossal amount she had consumed, it was a practically inconceivable concept. Ling Han now was not so curious about where the food she had consumed had gone. In comparison, the spirit base in the little girl's body was something even more shocking. Lady Yan sent out a carriage to deliver the three of them back to the academy. Yin Shuang did not accompany them this time, only Lady Yan and Yan Tianzhao escorted them to the door and saw them off. On the carriage, Hunyo, being a very good eater and a very good sleeper, had already found a comfortable spot in Ling Han's arms and gone to sleep peacefully. In a few moments, a long snoring sound could be heard from her. Lady Yan is really too pitiful. She had to support the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion all by herself and still take care of her comatose child. If I were her, I would most probably have broken down long ago, Lu Yutong said ruefully. Ling Han thought for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever thought about why Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma in the first place? It should have been some kind of inborn illness, right? Something like my 3 vanishing veins," Lu Yutong said. And it was exactly this fact that caused her to empathize with Yan Tianzhao and dote on him like a little brother. Then, when he fell into a coma, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. He has just barely woken up and yet can completely behave like a normal person. Isn't that strange? Ling Han asked. Maybe he's a natural-born genius? Lu Yutong paused, then said, You seem to be a bit unfond of Tianzhao. I don't like this person. Ling Han did not hide anything. Nyo doesn't like too. Hunyo suddenly awoke, and sat upright on Ling Han's lap, looking extremely serious. Why? Lu Yutong felt a bit curious. Ling Han shook his head, and said, I can't describe why. I keep feeling that this brat is extremely evil, making me have the urge to thrash him. Therefore, it's best if this brat does not appear before me again, or I will definitely have fun thrashing him. How willful. Thrash him. Hit him. Hunyao waved her little hands too. You guys. Lu Yutong was completely speechless. Why would Ling Han dislike Yan Tianzhao? Could it be because I doted on him too much, so this guy is jealous? When she thought of this, Lu Yutong's heart could not help beating wildly. Since you don't like it, then I won't see him again, she said, tugging at her sleeve. A beautiful blush rose up on her face, giving her a very tempting look. Was this girl misunderstanding something? But never mind, as long as she did not come into contact with Yan Tianzhao again, that would be fine. Though this brat did not have a single bit of power in him, Ling Han still felt he was really too strange. And if his deductions were not wrong and Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma because of something someone else did, then perhaps it was because someone had discovered his evil nature, yet could not bear to kill a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and so merely caused him to fall into a coma. Chapter 163, Jin Wuji's Request. After returning to the Huyang Academy, Ling Han and Lu Yutong both went their own way. He had just stepped into his own courtyard when he immediately heard Lu Ru'er's nagging voice. As a landlord, you are really a failure. You did not even prepare food for us, she seethed. Ling Han could not help a strange expression appearing on his face as he asked, "Don't tell me you two don't know how to cook." Instantly, Lu Ru'er's almond-shaped eyes widened, and she blurted out, "How did you know?" "I can easily tell from looks of your incompetence," Ling Han sighed. This pair of assassin sisters were really failures. They failed at assassination and did not even know how to cook. They really were the rookies of all rookies. "Hang, who are you calling incompetent?" Lu Ru'er asked with a defiant expression. "When I have recovered all my abilities, I will definitely give you a good thrashing." Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, "Then why should I still continue to care for two enemies like you two?" I've been short of money recently, and if I take advantage of the chance to provide information on two criminals, I should be able to get quite a considerable sum of money. Lu Ru'er instantly paled and gasped in fear. "You're just scaring me." "Am I?" Ling Han crossed one leg over the other, an unfathomable expression on his face. Lu Ru'er wavered. She had always been living under the protection of her elder sister and never needed to worry about the bad intentions of others. Now that she was facing Ling Han, who was in his second lifetime on her own, she was naturally easily played by him. "Come, sing a little song for me." "If you sing well enough, then I'll let you off," Ling Han said, smiling. Lu Ru'er finally understood that Ling Han was just trying to scare her and could not help patting her breasts as she said, "You're so mean." But, she immediately raised her head and added, "All right, then I'll sing a song. But, don't think that I'm afraid of you. It's just been too long since I last sang, and I feel an itch in my throat." She opened her mouth and began singing. The song she sang was mellow, and would easily touch the hearts of listeners. Ling Han nodded internally. This little girl was a bit of a ditz, but she was indeed quite a talented singer. Looks like she went into the wrong business. Noisy. Noisy. Hunyao was awakened by the song and glared in displeasure at Lu Ru'er, her ferocious nature fully out in the open. Lu Ru'er was not very happy with her critique and said, "I have such a beautiful voice, and you actually say it's noisy. There is indeed no hint of elegance in you." "Hang." Hunyao glared at her in defiance. The two girls glared furiously at one another, neither willing to back down. From the looks of it, they were prepared to glare at each other until the end of time. Ling Han yawned, stood up and walked to his bedroom, intending to go to bed. "Xiao," Hunyao immediately took a great leap and clung onto Ling Han. Then, she turned and made a silly face at Lu Ru'er. Such a failure. She couldn't even handle a little kid. Lu Ru'er clutched her hair in frustration. As an assassin, she couldn't even win in a staring competition with a little girl. Was she really suited to become an assassin? When he awoke, there was a shade of pale white in the eastern sky. Ling Han sat up in a cross-legged position and began to cultivate. He was deliberately waking up earlier now to cultivate at a different time from Hunyo. This way, he would not need to run all over the place to cultivate elsewhere. Not bad. I'll be able to break through to the 8th layer of element gathering tier in 3 days. Ling Han smiled. What he wanted the most now was to break through to gushing spring tier and peer into the secrets of the Black Tower. By now, the sun had already risen and Ling Han woke Hunyo up. Though the little girl looked very reluctant, she still adhered to Ling Han's request and began to cultivate. Hunyo had such a terrifying potential, who knows, her future achievements may not be one bit beneath his. Ling Han prepared breakfast. He was extremely depressed at this. It was fine when he had Hunyo staying with him, but now that there were 2 bigger girls living with him, it was still up to him to cook. This was really unfair. Tong, tong, tong. A knock sounded on the main door. Who could it be? Ling Han walked over, opened the door and discovered that his visitor was Jin Wuji. Why did this guy come over? Brother Jin, why are you here so early? Ling Han asked, smiling. Jin Wuji smiled bitterly, and said, Brother Ling, would like to ask for your help. With what? Ling Han asked, in no rush to agree to anything yet. Jin Wuji hesitated for a moment, then asked, Is Brother Ling able to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion? Ling Han could not help but look at Jin Wuji strangely. Had this guy struck some deal with Lady Yen? Ling Han had just received the Cherishing Flower command yesterday, and there was already someone here today to ask for his help to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Brother Ling, I don't know what else to do. You know a lot of people, and I'm desperate. That's why I am here to shamelessly ask for your help, Jin Wuji sighed. Ling Han smiled, and asked, What's going on? Why would you need a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion? If I tell you, promise me you won't laugh at me. Jin Wuji actually blushed. Ling Han put on a serious face, and said, I promise I won't laugh. Jin Wuji gathered his thoughts for a moment, then began to speak. Apparently, he met a daughter of a minor clan from the Imperial City a year ago. Her name was Jiang Fei Yen, and the 2 of them had fallen in love with each other. Their relationship had even reached the point that they were beginning to discuss marriage. However, though the Jin clan was a great clan in Deyuan City, it was only considered a minor clan in the Imperial City. Moreover, those who were living in an area under the direct jurisdiction of the emperor all had an inborn arrogance and felt a sense of superiority towards others. The Jiang clan was thus not very satisfied with a future son-in-law like Jin Wuji and kept trying to separate the couple. Thus, Jin Wuji kept trying to rack his brains, hoping to find some way to change the opinion the Jiang clan had of him. The requirements to enter the Cherishing Flower Pavilion were very high, and anyone who wanted to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion had to at least be from a middle-class clan. Thus, displaying his ability through treating the important members of the Jiang clan to a meal at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was undoubtedly a very good idea. But the problem now was that even if he had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, the Cherishing Flower Pavilion would still ignore his request, what more now that he was still only in Element Gathering Tier. Recently, the Jiang clan appeared to plan on marrying Jiang Fei Yen off to the 7th young master of a middle-class clan. Thus, Jin Wuji really had no idea what else he could do, and so came to try his luck with Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just arrived at the Imperial City for a few days and had already gotten to know a disciple of Wu Songling, and could even possibly be an honored guest of Grandmaster Wu. Therefore, even if Ling Han had no way to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion by himself, he could still go through Wu Songlin to make the reservation. When he heard the full story, Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly as he said, I had never imagined that Brother Jin would actually be a romantic. Brother Ling, you promised you wouldn't laugh. Meanwhile, Jin Wuji was continuously sighing, distress all over his face. Ling Han still continued to laugh. He patted Jin Wuji on his shoulder and said, Brother Jin, I am not able to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but... When Jin Wuji heard his words, he looked disappointed at first. But then, he suddenly heard that meaningful pause, so his heart involuntarily started to beat wildly in excitement. Does Brother Ling have some other way? I can't reserve a regular table, but would a side courtyard be all right? Ling Han asked, smiling. Pooh. Jin Wuji instantly choked. If one wanted to reserve a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion, then one definitely had to have the cultivation level of Spiritual Ocean Tier and above, or be backed by a Spiritual Ocean Tier elite. For example, the members of the main branch of middle-class clans were able to make a reservation. However, they still needed to make the reservation in advance, because the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was really too good. If they did not make the reservation well in advance, they would not be able to get a table. And in the case of side courtyards, one would at least require the cultivation level of Spiritual Pedestal Tier or the backing of a Spiritual Pedestal Tier elite to be able to make a reservation for a side courtyard. Brother Ling, you're not joking with me, are you? This surprise was huge, leaving Jin Wuji stuttering in his words. Chapter 164, Snobbish Relatives. Don't worry. Ling Han laughed and asked, when do you intend to treat Miss Zhang's family members? When is the earliest possible time you can get a reservation, Brother Ling? Jin Wuji asked in return. He naturally wanted it to be done as soon as possible. Ling Han spread his hands and answered, whichever day is fine for me. If you're in a rush, I can get one even tonight. Even tonight? Jin Wuji's heartbeat sped up a bit more. What kind of concept was that? Members of the 8 great clans as well as the imperial family of course had the ability to reserve a side courtyard at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but even they would not be able to go there at the drop of a hat. Even these extremely important people had to make reservations well in advance. Only a very rare few had the special privilege to make use of a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion without making any reservations in advance. The Cherishing Flower Pavilion had the practice of setting apart a few side courtyards that were specifically for such emergencies and could be used without any reservations at all. For example, the third imperial prince was one who had this special privilege. But, who was the third imperial prince? He was a genius of martial arts on his own, with a cultivation level of the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, also one of the heirs to the throne. In the future, he would definitely become a very powerful person. But what about Ling Han, then? Could it be that he also had this kind of special privilege? Jin Wuji was really astonished. He knew that Ling Han was a monster who had charged out like a dark horse to take the first place in the De Yuan tournament, and had even managed to obtain the full support of 3 black-grade low-level alchemists. But, that was only in De Yuan City. This was the Imperial City. Ling Han had just been here for a few days, and he was already so high up on the social ladder. To compare yourself with others would indeed drive one crazy. Jin Wuji could not help but sigh internally. He had been in the Imperial City for more than 3 years, but aside from the significant increase of his cultivation level, there was not even one bit of increase to his personal status. If he compared himself with Ling Han, he would really die of embarrassment. He had no suspicions that Ling Han was just bluffing. Ling Han could be a joker at times, but he would never make unrealistic boasts on matters like this. Tonight, then. Jin Wuji said, barely able to hide the excitement on his face. For a minor clan like the Jiang clan, they wouldn't even be able to step through the main doors of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, what more to have a meal at one of the side courtyards within. After this night, what need would there be for him to still fear that the Jiang clan would continue to look down on him and object to his and Jiang Fei Yan's marriage? All right. Ling Han nodded. Thank you, Brother Ling. Thank you, Brother Ling. Jin Wuji bowed repeatedly, obviously very excited. He secretly decided that no matter what favors Ling Han needed from him in the future, he would do everything in his might to help him. He turned and left. It was naturally to inform the Jiang clan about the dinner tonight. This was something he should be very proud of to announce. Meanwhile, Ling Han remained in his courtyard, immersing himself in comprehending the art of the sword. He had reached a bottleneck and had been stuck on mere 6 flashes of sword chi for a very long time. Yet, somehow he had still not managed to break through and form the 7th flash of sword chi. In truth, even if it was an extremely capable swordsman, it was already very impressive to be able to form a single flash of sword chi in 10 years' time. Moreover, the more flashes of sword chi one managed to form, the more they would slow down in their advance. By the time a swordsman got to be about 100 years old, if he had managed to form 10 flashes of sword chi, he would be praised as a genius of martial arts. However, Ling Han was not satisfied. His starting point was well ahead of all others, so naturally he could not compare himself with the normal rate of advance. Previously, he had spent a lot of time on discussions of the art of the sword with Mo Gao. Mo Gao was a mad genius who had actually managed to touch a sliver of the mysteries of sword heart and had given Ling Han a lot of inspiration. On the spot, Ling Han had managed to form his 6th flash of sword chi. However, this had also expended all the accumulated understanding he had built up, so it would be indeed difficult for him to advance another step forward in a short period of time. Ling Han sat in a cross-legged position, holding his right index finger out as if it was a sword he was wielding. He continued to wave his finger around in various sword movements, examining the art of the sword that he had managed to comprehend so far in his mind. Before he knew it, it was already noon. He stopped and got up to prepare food for Hunoth. Food for himself and the Lu sisters was just cooked in passing. It would be an accomplishment enough if they even managed to finish off 100th of the food that he had prepared. He spent the afternoon on his studies of the art of the sword. For Ling Han, there was nothing much that the academy could teach him. Before he came, he had already decided that the primary purpose he was here was just to make Ling Dongxing happy. However, the path he was meant to walk in the future had already been well planned in advance by him. In the evening, he brought Hunyao along with him to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. He merely flashed the Cherishing Flower command, and automatically, there were female attendants leading him to an elegant side courtyard and inquiring him about the dishes and wines to be served for the dinner tonight. The appetizers were served first. When Hunyao saw them, she could not help but feel her appetite stirred up and failed to hold back from stealing a few bites, causing the 8 female attendants serving them to cover their mouths as they smiled secretly. Ling Han would naturally not reprimand her either. After all, he was not short of money now. If she finished off a plate, then he'd just have another plate served. After about half an hour, a company of 8 walked in, led by a female attendant. Aside from Jin Wuji, the other 7 people of this party was naturally the members of the Jiang clan. They included Jiang Fei Yan and her parents, as well as her 2 aunts and their 2 sons. So this is a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. It's really too beautiful. In the past, we only managed to get into the ordinary rooms of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Looks like Fei Yan has really found the right guy this time. He can even manage to make a reservation for a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Yes, yes. I heard that only members of the 8 great clans and the imperial family have the ability to reserve a side courtyard here. Then wouldn't that mean that we are at the same level as the 8 great clans and the imperial family now? The older members of the Jiang clan were all looking very excited. As a minor clan, they did not have much to worry about. The only thing they lacked was advancement in their social status and recognition of their status. Merely having dinner here tonight would be enough for them to boast for the rest of their lives. Do you have any souvenirs here that I can attach to my clothes? Eldest aunt immediately asked one of the female attendants. If there were, then she would definitely attach it to her clothes every day and would show it to everyone she met. The female attendant stared blankly. Those who were able to come here to spend money were naturally of extremely high status, so she had never been asked such a question by anyone else before. She could not help but be stunned for a moment, before replying, "We don't." "How could you not have any?" Youngest aunt also leaned over. "Why not you ask someone to prepare one for us?" "That's right. That's right. Prepare one," eldest aunt said hurriedly. When they heard the words of these two senior relatives, Jin Wuji and Jiang Fei Yan both blushed to the roots of their hair, feeling unbearably ashamed. Meanwhile, those two cousins of Jiang Fei Yan kept staring pervertedly at the faces and breasts of the female attendants with deep focus. Brother Jin. Ling Han stood and waved at Jin Wuji. Brother Ling. Jin Wuji returned the gesture, filled with gratitude. Thank you very much, Brother Jin. Thanks to you, I can also enjoy a meal at this cherishing flower pavilion for once, Ling Han said, smiling. Jin Wuji knew that Ling Han was trying to put him in a high position. He could not help feeling very touched by the action, and only nodded repeatedly. Ling Han smiled. Though there had been a little conflict between himself and Jin Wuji and Jin Wuxiang, Jin Wuji had already apologized long ago, so everything was forgotten. And afterwards, Jin Wuji purposely forfeited his match at the De Yuan tournament, and even brought his own people to help rescue Ling Dongxing. Whether or not Ling Han had needed it, all these were debts that Ling Han owed. Debts would naturally have to be repaid, so Ling Han was very willing to act as a minor role to cast a better light on Jin Wuji. You naturally have to thank our Wuji. Eldest aunt wore a very despising expression, looking very disdainful. I heard that you are a friend of Wuji's from the De Yuan city. You are indeed a country bumpkin that doesn't know the rules of proper society. It was already nice enough to invite you to dinner, and you actually brought a little girl along with you. Jin Wuji's expression changed immediately, and he was about to speak up. Yet when he saw Ling Han shake his head at him, he could only swallow the urge down. Ling Han did not take the words of eldest aunt to heart at all. They went in one ear and out the other. What need was there for him to take such a vulgar person seriously? After all, they would only be meeting this once. In the future, he would not see these people again. Thankfully, the members of the Jiang clan were all mesmerized by the new sights they saw since it was their first time entering into a side courtyard of the cherishing flower pavilion. When the dishes were served one after another, as smoothly as the flow of water, they could not bother with displaying disdain for Ling Han any longer and began enjoying the food. Aya! One of the female attendants suddenly exclaimed in shock, pointed at the Jiang Fei Yan's eldest cousin, and said, He touched my bottom. Chapter 165, Guess Whom We Saw. Why are you making such a fuss? You have a tiger's bottom, is it that I can't even touch? Zhang Hualian, the eldest cousin, humphed, looking very displeased. After all, touching someone else's bottom was a very lowly thing to do, and he, who thought himself a Casanova, would not want to be exposed for doing such a thing in such a public venue. Aren't you going to apologize to my cousin? Tong Yuan, the second cousin, spoke up as well, arrogance all over his face. We are the most honored customers of your cherishing flower pavilion. Do you know who honored customers are? Those who are able to enter into a side courtyard are all in the ranks of spiritual pedestal tier elites. One word from us, and your whole family would be dead. The female attendant looked both angry and embarrassed. However, she was only a female attendant with little power. It was obviously she who had experienced a loss, yet now, according to them, it was also she who was in the wrong. The two aunts looked on indifferently. In their eyes, a mere female attendant was naturally not worth even a single hair off the heads of their sons. So what if their son touched her bottom? She wouldn't lose a pound of flesh anyway. Moreover, weren't the women here all selling their bodies? What was the point in acting all noble now? Eldest cousin, second cousin, just let it go. Jiang Fei Yan spoke up. As a woman, she was naturally sympathizing with the female attendant. However, the one who had taken advantage was her own cousin. She couldn't possibly help outsiders against her own family members, right? Fei Yan, you are going to be a bride of a major clan in future, and going to have a very noble status. There is no need for you to sympathize with these little b******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* immediately said to Jiang Fei Yan in a lecturing tone. That's right, Fei Yan. You can't be too kind. As the matriarch of a major clan, you must learn to be ruthless in your ways, youngest aunt continued. Both Zhang Fei Yan's own parents remained silent, however. From the looks of it, both her parents did not have much of a voice within the Zhang clan. Instead, they couldn't even compare with these two daughters who had married outside the clan. The truth was indeed so. The current clan head of the Zhang clan was Zhang Fei Yan's grandmother, and she very much doted on these two daughters of hers who had married outside the clan because they had both managed to marry well. Both their husbands were members of middle-class clans. Though their husbands were not very important in their own clans, they still benefited from the protection and influence of their clans. Naturally, they were very confident in front of their relatives who were only members of a minor clan. Every time they returned to their parents' home, they would strut around in front of their siblings. As time passed, Zhang Fei Yan's parents spoke less, allowing these two aunts to speak as much as they liked. This time, the plans to marry Zhang Fei Yan off to a middle-class clan was naturally the handiwork of these two aunts. In their eyes, this was naturally all for Zhang Fei Yan's own good. However, Jin Wuji suddenly transformed to become so awesome that he could even manage to reserve a side courtyard of cherishing flower pavilion. The attitudes of these two aunts naturally changed, and they began to mend their relationship with Zhang Fei Yan's father, intending to get to a higher position through the help of Jin Wuji in the future. The female attendant was already crying from the harsh words of these two aunts. Unfortunately, the cherishing flower pavilion had its own rules. She did not dare to cover up her face and leave it all. Zhang Hualian saw this and became even bolder as he said, "Come and sit beside me. Accompany me for a cup of wine." Humph. Ling Han stood up. He knew that the members of the Zhang clan were snobbish and overbearing, yet had never thought that even two juniors would behave so lecherously out in the open. He approached that female attendant, handed her a monetary note, and said, "I am really sorry. This is a small token from me. Though it cannot compensate for the wounds to your self-esteem, but please accept it." That female attendant took one look at the monetary note, and paled in shock. It was a monetary note worth 10,000 silver coins. One had to understand that she was only a female attendant who had a cultivation level of the 7th layer of body refining tier. The most she could earn in a single month would be about 300 silver coins. Though this was also quite a considerable sum of money, when compared with the colossal amount of 10,000, there was indeed a huge difference. "Mister, I do not dare accept," she said, blushing. "Just accept it," Ling Han said, smiling. He waved his hand and said, "We do not need your service here anymore. All of you may leave." "Yes, mister." The 8 female attendants all bowed in response. They naturally were well aware that the real boss here was Ling Han, and they all looked at Ling Han with gratitude in their eyes. When their eyes swept over the few members of the Zhang clan, their gazes were filled with strong disdain and despise. "Who allowed you to leave? All of you are to stay here." Zhang Hualian immediately called out. "That's right. How dare you leave?" Tong Yuan even stood up, and from the look of him, he was planning to stop them from leaving. Jin Wuji hurriedly stood as well and pushed Tong Yuan back into his seat as he said, "Second cousin, forget about it." He was aware that Ling Han was already displeased. If Tong Yuan dared to step forward and make trouble, Ling Han would most likely fly into a rage on the spot. Those two aunts of the Jiang clan were also about to explode, but when they saw that Jin Wuji had spoken up to settle the issue, they could only push down their anger. They did not dare offend Jin Wuji now. After all, he was a man who could manage to reserve a side courtyard of cherishing flower pavilion. "Wuji, youngest aunt is not really trying to reprimand you. However, your kindness to your friends is because of your own loyalty to friends, but friends would still be outsiders. How could they be as dependable as your own people?" Youngest aunt pursed her lips, targeting Ling Han with her words. "That's right. Just take a look. You kindly invited your friend over to broaden his horizons, and what does he do? He actually brought a filthy little girl with him. She looks like she has not eaten anything in her entire life. How embarrassing." My advice is, it's best to break off the friendship with such a person. Eldest aunt said as well. The two had not spoken in very low voices, obviously deliberately loud enough for Ling Han to hear their words. Jin Wuji received a horrible scare. Break off the friendship with such a person? If he did not have the friendship with such a person, how would you all be able to sit here to enjoy dinner tonight? He stole a look at Ling Han, and when he saw that Ling Han did not appear to be angry, he was greatly relieved. Still, he did not dare to allow these two shrews to continue with their words, and quickly said, Come, come, come. Everyone, please enjoy your drinks and food. Uncle, auntie, please allow me to offer you a drink. He raised his head directly, and drained his cup. Ling Han knew that Jin Wuji was making his apologies in this way. He smiled calmly. Tonight's dinner was to repay Jin Wuji's previous favors to him, so he would naturally not easily be angered. All would depend on whether those two ants of the Jiang clan continued to seek their deaths. After a few rounds of wine, they were all a bit tipsy. Eldest aunt stood up, and said to youngest aunt, We have never been to a side courtyard before. Let's go stroll around. Who knows, we might meet with some important people. If we manage to befriend them, then we'd flourish in the future. Right, right, right. Youngest aunt hurriedly stood up as well. This pair of snobbish sisters leaned on each other and made their way out. However, after only a few moments, they returned, and it was as if their faces were shining. Guess whom we saw just now? Without waiting for an answer, they both quickly answered their own question. Grandmaster Yuanshu Yuan. Do you all know who Grandmaster Yuanshu is? A black-grade middle-level alchemist. His status is high enough to scare all of you to death. The members of the Jiang clan did indeed receive a scare. That was a black-grade middle-level alchemist they were talking about. A being like that was like a mountain to them, someone that they could only look up to. Hualian, Yuaner, come with me, quick. Let's go and greet Grandmaster Yuanshu. Who knows, when Grandmaster Yuanshu is happy, he'd decide to concoct a few furnaces worth of alchemical pills for us. By that time, it would be very easy for the two of you to break through to element gathering tier, eldest aunt said excitedly. That was why the two of them had returned in such a hurry. That would not be appropriate, would it? Grandmaster Yuanshu is a very noble status. If we so rashly disturb him, it may possibly anger Grandmaster Yuanshu, Jin Wuji said immediately. Ling Han did not get angry for his sake, but who was Grandmaster Yuanshu? There was no way that he would give face to Jin Wuji, and definitely not to the Jiang clan. Che, we are now high up on the social ladder as well. We're just asking for a few furnaces worth of pills. Youngest aunt said calmly. You two are idiots. Jin Wuji cursed internally. He suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge to rush forward and slap these two silly. Chapter 166, Getting into Trouble. Anyone who could manage to sit and dine in a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion was considered of extremely noble status. What kind of bizarre theory was that? These two idiots. Who was Grandmaster Yuanshu? If they dared to so rashly barge in, who knows if he would be angered by their lack of manners. Even if they were killed right on the spot, they would have died for nothing. Unfortunately, this pair of sisters had already lost their wits. Mother, can we really break through to element gathering tier? Zhang Hualian asked very excitedly. Of course. He is an authentic black-grade middle-level alchemist. Breaking through to Gushing Spring tier would be a piece of cake with his help. What more element gathering tier? Eldest aunt waved her hand, acting as if Yuanshu was her servant that she could command to concoct alchemical pills as she liked. Good, good, good. Quickly, let's go. Zhang Hualian and Tong Yuan both stood up hurriedly. Neither of them were very talented in martial arts and had been stuck in the 9th layer of body refining tier for quite some time without any hint of breaking through anytime soon. In the Imperial City, this kind of cultivation level was really considered trash. The two mother and son pairs impatiently rushed out. Jiang Fei Yan's parents were about to stop them from leaving, when Ling Han signaled at Jin Wuji with his eyes, indicating him to stop the Jiang parents from doing anything. Just let them experience a little hardship. Ling Han said calmly. Brother Ling, that's Grandmaster Yuanshu we're talking about here. If he were to get angry, Jin Wuji was no idiot. If a black-grade middle-level alchemist wanted to oppose a minor clan who only had a background of gushing spring tear, that would only require a mere thought from the former. He would not care if those two unreasonable, snobbish mother and son pairs died as a result of their idiocy, but worried that they would also drag the Jiang clan down with them. No matter, Ling Han smiled faintly. If it was anyone else, he would still have to do something to settle the issue. However, it was Yuanshu. He was practically Ling Han's lackey. Jiang Fei Yan's parents were not fools. When they heard the conversation between the two young men, how could they not understand? They finally knew that Ling Han was the real reason why they were able to enter into Cherishing Flower Pavilion. How foolish and funny of them to have thought that Ling Han had come over to join in the dinner on Jin Wuji's invitation. Since Brother Ling says so, then I am relieved. When Jin Wuji saw that Jiang Fei Yan and her parents had understood the ins and outs of the situation, he naturally would not continue to hide the truth, and said, "It is all thanks to Brother Ling that I was able to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion this time. I am only benefiting from my association with you." The Jiang parents both smiled. Firstly, they were not as snobbish as those two aunts, and secondly, they were smarter than them. It was all right that it was not Jin Wuji's credit that they were able to come here. The important thing was that Jin Wuji had this kind of relationship, friend, and background. In the future, as long as Jin Wuji was able to marry Jiang Fei Yan, then others would still give a bit of face to the Jiang clan, even if only for Ling Han's sake. It was an extremely pleasurable thing to interact with smart people, and the air around the banquet table became livelier. Even Hu Niu was clapping her hands on the table, demanding to drink wine, which caused all the others to laugh at her antics. On the surface, the little girl was still very adorable and cute, so much that Jiang Fei Yan continuously stared at her. Since Miss Jiang likes children so much, why not quickly marry Brother Jin and have a cute son of your own? I will definitely prepare a very, very big red packet as a gift at that time. Ling Han teased. Jiang Fei Yan instantly blushed red and lowered her head shyly. Meanwhile, Jin Wuji was much bolder than her, and said with a loud laugh, "Brother Ling, that's what you said. A very, very big red packet, right? I will remember your words, and you definitely can't break your word." "Niu wants red packet too," Hu Niu proclaimed, raising her hand. "Just eat, you." Ling Han shoved a chicken thigh into her hands, and the little girl immediately began chewing on it happily. Woo, woo, woo. It was at this moment that the door to the side courtyard was pushed open. Zhang Hualian and Tong Yuan were both supporting their respective mothers as they entered. All four of them were scowling miserably, and looked as if they had just received a terrible thrashing. They were all black and blue, making for a very sorry display. With all said and done, Jiang Fei Yan's father was still the younger brother of these two women. He hurriedly stood up, and asked, "What has happened?" "Uncle." Zhang Hualian and Tong Yuan were both shivering in fear as they said, "We went over to request Grandmaster Yuanshu to help us concoct some alchemical pills, but he did not agree to our request. Mother and youngest aunt said some rash things, which angered Grandmaster Yuanshu. He had us beaten up, and said that he would be coming over later to see what clan would dare to act so arrogant. Uncle, I'm still young. I don't want to die. You have to save me. Wuji, I am your eldest cousin. You can't simply stand by and watch as I die, right? You must have some way to save us, right?" One of the cousins begged for Jiang Fei Yan's father to help them, while the other pled with Jin Wuji to save them. Jiang Fei Yan's father immediately frowned, and looked very displeased. These two sisters of his kept trying to make him lose face within the clan and had even allowed their two sons to interfere in the matters of the Jiang clan. They were obviously intending to make a grab for the family property of the Jiang clan. He could tolerate all this because he was not a person who placed a lot of importance on power and material things in the first place. Moreover, he only had a single daughter, and his one and only wish was for his daughter to marry a good man. Then, he would be able to leave all his worries behind, and travel all over the world with his beloved wife. But these two idiots actually went and angered a black-grade alchemist. Were they trying to drag the Jiang clan down with them? There was too much involved in this issue. There was absolutely no way that he would allow the whole Jiang clan to fall as a result of their stupidity and die with them, so he said, "You were the ones who caused the trouble. You figure out how to get Grandmaster Yuanchu's forgiveness on your own. Jiang Bo Xian, you're really too ruthless." Eldest aunt instantly jumped up, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. "These are your flesh and blood nephews, and you want to just stand by and watch as they die?" Jiang Fei Yan's father could not help but shake his head. These two sisters of his had not even realized the errors of their ways. They were really unreasonable. Then, he asked furiously, "What did you actually say to Grandmaster Yuanchu that he would be making his way here personally?" Eldest aunt and the other three all exchanged hesitant looks, but did not say anything. According to what Jiang Fei Yan's father knew of their characters, how could he not guess? The four of them must have dragged everyone here into the issue in order to escape. They must have bluffed and said some grand names to be able to escape out of that situation. After all, those who were able to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion were all of extremely noble status. Grandmaster Yuanchu would definitely not drop to the level of the four idiots, but would still make his way to personally see the host here. He would be calling the main host to account for the offense that these four had committed. They were really going to suffer, and everything was because of these four idiots. Jiang Fei Yan's father suddenly felt an urge to spit out blood in his extreme fury. It was already enough that these two mother and son pairs were as stupid as pigs, but they actually even implicated others, making him feel an uncontrollable urge to tear all four of them into pieces. From outside, the sound of footsteps was heard coming nearer and nearer. Then, a knock was heard on the door, and a man's voice said, "We are here on behalf of Grandmaster Yuanchu to pay our respects to the host of this side courtyard." Shua, Jin Wuji, and the others all stood, all of them looking very anxious. Though Ling Han had already assured them just now that everything would be all right, he was really still much too young. Who would put too much confidence in his words? When they thought about it, even if Ling Han was awesome, the source of his awesomeness must be from the party behind him. But what party could actually overcome the fury of a black-grade middle-level alchemist? Within Rain Country, there were only a few individuals who would have such ability, such as the current Rain Emperor and the clan heads of the 8 great clans. "Quickly, go and receive Grandmaster Yuanchu," Jiang Fei Yan's father said hurriedly. He did not believe that Ling Han's backer could be even more powerful than a black-grade middle-level alchemist. It was simple. Ling Han was not a member of the imperial family of Rain Country, nor one of the younger members of the 8 great clans. All of them approached the door. Everyone was shuddering apprehensively. The pressure of an oncoming meeting with a black-grade middle-level alchemist was really much too heavy. Ling Han meanwhile remained seated where he was, and together with Hu Niu, continued to enjoy his food. Chapter 167, Pursuing the Matter. "Which clan are you all from? How dare you be so bold to actually command Grandmaster Yuanchu to concoct alchemical pills for you? I really want to know if you all are from the imperial family or the 8 great clans." They were from the Wu clan, one of the 8 great clans. Because the 8 great clans and the imperial family were all very familiar with one another, they naturally knew that none of these people came from one of these 9 powerful parties, and since they were not, what other party would be more powerful than the Wu clan in the whole of Rain Country? In their minds, these people must have come from some backwater place and gone through some unknown relations to be able to enter into a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Thus, they thought themselves superior to all others that they would even dare to be so insolent in front of Grandmaster Yuanchu. We, eldest aunt was shivering so much she kept stuttering. Her eyes were filled with a strong fear as she had already recognized the clan insignia that these 3 men were wearing, the Wu clan. One of the 8 great clans. Though she had married into a good clan, it was only a middle-class clan. Moreover, her husband was only a minor character with little actual power in the clan. If he knew that she actually offended the Wu clan, it was practically guaranteed that he would cut off her head at the earliest opportunity and head to the Wu clan to beg for forgiveness. The 8 great clans had the authority to decide one's life and death, and were only beneath the imperial family in terms of power. What I? Say it quickly, who gave you the audacity to actually dare shout commands at Grandmaster Yuan Shu? The 3 men of the Wu clan pressed menacingly, smiling coldly at them. Jiang Fei Yan's father almost fainted in shock and terror. He had only heard his 2 elder sisters downplay the real situation, about how their request for Grandmaster Yuan Shu to concoct alchemical pills for them had been refused. He had never imagined that his 2 stupid sisters would actually dare act so insolently to Grandmaster Yuan Shu. He was completely pale by this point. If a black-grade middle-level alchemist were to be angered, and the Wu clan of the 8 great clans stepped out to punish the offender, the Jiang clan was definitely going to be finished and no one would dare to speak a single word in their defense. Wouldn't that be the case? Who asked them to offend an alchemist in the first place? Alchemists were an outstanding group of their own. They were a group of people others wanted nothing more than favor and goodwill of, and what do? You actually dare to behave so rudely to an alchemist. Who else were they going to kill if not you? Old 6, old 8, go and slap them. The mouths of these 2 B*** are really too smelly. Just now, because Grandmaster Yuan Shu was there, we did not have enough fun slapping them. Go and continue slapping them, a green-robed middle-aged man said. All right. The other 2 walked forwards to grab eldest aunt and youngest aunt. Both of them were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and had outstandingly strong ability. Though eldest aunt and youngest aunt wanted to flee, how could things go their way? They were instantly caught. Pa. The 2 shrews with bad mouths were continuously slapped, and very quickly, their faces were completely swollen. They even spat out a few pieces of broken teeth, and this was still because the 2 men had pulled their punches. Otherwise, if they had really used their full strength, what could 2 mere weaklings in body refining tier do? Zhang Hualian and Tong Yuan did not even dare to say one word. They could only curl around one another and hide in a corner. I am a daughter-in-law of Duanmu clan. Don't kill me. Eldest aunt sobbed. Her face that used to be quite smooth and rounded was now completely covered with blood and tears, making for an indescribably ugly picture. Duanmu clan, the green-robed man humphed. When has the Duanmu clan become so awesome? I'd really like to get an explanation from Duanmu Xiang. Duanmu Xiang was the current clan head of the Duanmu clan, but from the tone that this green-robed man was using, he obviously did not think that he was anyone important, causing eldest aunt to be filled with hopelessness. The emergency situation caused her brain to work faster, and she hurriedly called out, Wuji. Wuji. Save me. That's right, Wuji. Since you can manage to reserve a side courtyard here, your status must not be beneath his. Announce your status to scare him to death. Youngest aunt suddenly called out as well, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Ha, the green-robed man laughed coldly. Someone actually wanted to use his status to scare him to death. Then he really wanted to know what person could be so awesome. Jin Wuji only felt a layer of cold sweat covering his body. He was only the 3rd young master of the Jin clan of Deyuan City. In Deyuan City, this identity was indeed enough to scare a lot of people to death, but when in the imperial city, Pei, it was nothing. What Wuji are you? The green-robed man smiled coldly. I am standing right here. Tell me your name, and see if you can scare me to death. This sir must be joking. This is all just a misunderstanding. Jin Wuji said, raising his clasped hands politely in greeting. These 2 seniors have drunk too much, and that's why they had so boldly went off to look for Grandmaster Yuan Shu. I would very much like to ask for forgiveness from all of you as well as Grandmaster Yuan Shu. Hee, do you know what this shrew actually called Grandmaster Yuan Shu? There was a sliver of a mocking smile about the corners of the green-robed man's lips. Old dog. Did you hear that? They actually dared to call Grandmaster Yuan Shu old dog. I have lived for so many years and this is the first time I've seen someone actually dared to insult Grandmaster Yuan Shu as old dog. Jin Wuji and the other 3 members of the Jiang clan all turned pale. They had almost leaped forwards to strangle these 2 shrews to death. If they wanted to die, then they should just die on their own. Why had they come back to drag others down with them? Eldest aunt and youngest aunt were both filled with absolute regret. Part of the reason they dared to behave so arrogantly was because they had suddenly been able to sit within a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion, making them feel as if their social status had shot up all of a sudden. But the more important reason was because they were indeed drunk. Otherwise, no matter how idiotic they would not have dared to so rashly request for alchemical pills from Grandmaster Yuan Shu, what more insult him as old dog after being refused. But now, it was all too late. Nothing more to say, right? The green-robed man crossed his hands behind his back, his eyes sweeping over the surroundings, and gave a humph, as he said, "You country bumpkins are indeed arrogant. I've already been here for such a long time, and there is actually someone who still dares to remain seated." He had finally spotted Ling Han. Ling Han did not even spare him a look. He only focused all his energy on fighting with Hun Yo over the food. He was naturally just playing with the little girl, because even if he had managed to successfully grab any food, he would not eat it. He was already full. How insolent. Seeing your father here, you still dare to remain seated? The green-robed man glared, and a domineering pressure emanated from him. Ling Han's eyes turned cold, and gave a wave of his hand. The bone in his hand immediately flew towards the green-robed man. The green-robed man stretched out a hand to grab the bone, but just when his hand was about to come into contact with it, the piece of bone actually miraculously turned in a different direction, past his hand, and with a paw, hit his face. Firstly, he had underestimated his opponent, and secondly, Ling Han had tossed it in a strange way, which was what allowed for such a thing to happen. "You are seeking death," the green-robed man roared furiously. He leaped forwards towards Ling Han and brandished his fist, preparing to give Ling Han a thrashing. Ling Han's feet pressed down on the ground, and he had shot backwards. Using the exiting cloud steps was something that he could do easily. A weakling of mere element gathering tier actually could act so calmly when under the assault of a gushing spring tier elite. The green-robed man did not manage to hit his target, but when he still did not manage to take Ling Han down after a few moves, a serious expression came over his face. He stopped his attack, and said, "Brat, who are you? Slap yourself 10 times first. Then I'll talk to you," Ling Han said calmly. This man actually dared to call himself Ling Han's father right in front of him. How could he let him off without a thrashing? What arrogance, the green-robed man humphed coldly, and once again began attacking Ling Han. Xiao, Hun Yo quickly scrambled down from the chair and shot towards the green-robed man at an extremely fast speed. The green-robed man had not taken Hun Yo into account at first. But when the little girl moved, he experienced a sudden shock that this little girl who was only 5 to 6 years old was actually an element-gathering tier. Who would dare believe it? But due to his extreme fury, he decided to do something very underhanded. Since he could do nothing to Ling Han, then he'd just hurt this little girl instead. A cold smile appeared on his face, and he suddenly delivered a punch that made its way ruthlessly towards Hun Yo. "You dare!" Ling Han roared in anger. This man would actually cause such heavy injury to such a little girl. He was practically inhumane. He quickly leaped forwards, intending to block this punch for Hun Yo. Chapter 168, Hun Yo's Sneaky Kick. Ling Han was too far to be able to help Hun Yo, and right when he saw the fist of this green-robed man was just about to hit Hunyo's body, the little girl suddenly twisted away in a strange manner and dodged the incoming attack. In an instant, she appeared behind the green-robed man, formed her hands into claws and shwa, 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 delivered her own attack. Pang, pang, pang. An intensive round of attacks was heard, and the green-robed man once again paid the price for his carelessness. His back suffered a number of continuous attacks, and the clothing on his body was torn into pieces that flew around him like butterflies, followed by drops of blood spraying everywhere. Who would have thought that a little girl only 5 to 6 years old would have such formidable ability? However, there was ultimately a very big power gap between element gathering and gushing spring tear. Though the green-robed man looked to be in a terrible situation, he had already used origin power to protect his body. Thus, he did not suffer a serious injury. All his bones and internal organs were unharmed. Even so, he let out an ashamed and furious roar. He was a powerful elite warrior of the second layer of gushing spring tear, and he was actually so horribly wounded by a little girl. Die! He shot a punch towards Hunyo, who was still on his back. Hunyo immediately moved, and twisted around to place herself on the green-robed man's chest. Pang! He did not manage to stop his punch in time and actually punched his own back. The extreme pain caused his face to turn green, and tears uncontrollably rolled down his cheeks from the agony. Ling Han's cultivation level may have dropped, but his eyes were still very sharp. One look, and he did not worry anymore. Hunyo was going to be absolutely okay. Ah, get away from me. The green-robed man once again shot out his fist, this time towards his chest. But it was as if Hunyo was a monkey. She quickly and nimbly moved, and was now hanging onto his thigh. This time, the green-robed man finally learned his lesson. He managed to stop his own attack in time. Unfortunately, Hunyo delivered a sneaky kick right to his vulnerable B***********. So what if he was in gushing spring tear? There was still a lot of weaknesses on a person's body, such as the eyes, dantian, and for men, their D************. This kick was very solid and powerful. Immediately, the green-robed man used his hands to cover the place between his legs. He was swaying on his feet, and his whole face was red as he ground his teeth loudly. It was very clear to see that the veins on his neck were throbbing, but he could not even force out a single word in his agony. All the men in the area could not help but cross their legs tightly together as they felt a coldness in their hearts that gave rise to a layer of cold sweat. Hunyo jumped off, and clung onto Ling Han. She turned around and made a face at the green-robed man, as if she was merely an innocent, mischievous little girl. Pa! The green-robed man fell into a half-kneeling position on the ground. His whole body was spasming. It was obvious that this kick had injured him very severely. Who would have thought that a powerful elite of gushing spring tear would be defeated by a little girl in such a humiliating way? That's right. Such a move would incur disdain if it were anyone else, but if it were Hunyo, it was only to be expected. A big, strong man like you actually lowered yourself to bully a little girl. Even if your B******** were crushed, you would have deserved it. Moreover, you are in gushing spring tear, and your opponent is only a little kid 5 to 6 years old. This was a matter of unbearable shame and humiliation. Good job. Ling Han gave Hunyo a thumbs up. If anyone else dares to bully you in future, just kick them so hard you crush their B***********. If you get into trouble, don't worry. I'll be there to defend you. Nyo understands. Hunyo gave a wide, sweet smile. Right. How could he teach a child like that? Wasn't he worried that he would be a bad influence on her, and that she would become a female hooligan when she grew up? You're in big trouble. We are members of the Wu clan. The Wu clan. Have you heard of us? We're one of the 8 great clans. The other 2 members of the Wu clan tried to put up a strong appearance, though they were very afraid right now. The 2 of them were barely in element gathering tier 1. Don't think that just because they were the clansmen of a great clan, they were automatically powerful elites. Every clan had members that were more talented and those that were less talented. Then you too should also stay behind as well. Ling Han made a move, and charged to attack the other two. At the 4th layer of element gathering tier, he was already strong enough to oppose a powerful elite in the 9th layer of element gathering tier like Qi Yongyi. Now that his cultivation level had soared up to the 7th layer, what could these two pieces of trash do against him? With one move, he had subdued the two. Hunyao moved and gave the two men a violent thrashing. The members of the Jiang clan were all watching with a layer of cold sweat covering them. Those were clansmen of the Wu clan, and they were actually beaten up like they were dead dogs. Everything was over. Everyone here would be dying. Even eldest aunt and youngest aunt could no longer care about continuing to wail about their pains. They hurriedly rushed over, trying to stop Ling Han and Hunyao, these two maniacs. Ling Han would naturally not entangle himself with two shrews. He took several steps back. Anyways, he had already had his fun thrashing these three men. You're all dead. The green-robed man finally got his breath back, his face filled with shame and rage. He was in gushing spring tear, and should have been able to easily take all the people here down. Yet, in the end, he was actually so easily defeated at the hands of a little girl. He would never be able to wash away such a shameful thing from his name. If you don't speak, no one will think you are mute. Ling Han delivered a kick, and half the teeth in the green-robed man's mouth was spat out. The pain caused him to cry out. His injuries had become even heavier this time. The members of the Jiang clan were all looking at Ling Han as if he was crazy. In their eyes, Ling Han could not possibly have a background that could surpass the 8 great clans in terms of power. But he actually dared to thrash the members of the Wu clan so harshly. Wasn't that like an old man committing suicide? Tired of living? Even Jin Wuji was completely cold. He was well aware that Ling Han had come from the Yuan city, just like he had. At most, he was only familiar with a few black-grade low-level alchemists. They had gotten into trouble. This was really big trouble. We don't know you. Eldest aunt and youngest aunt said in trembling voices. Then they turned to Jiang Fei Yan's father and said, Jiang Bo Xian, we're also cutting all ties with you. From now onwards, there is no more relation between us. You were the ones who caused this trouble. Don't implicate us in this. Jiang Fei Yan, her parents, and Jin Wuji were all furious at their words. These two pairs of mother and son were the ones who had so rashly rushed out to find Grandmaster Yuan Shu, and had even dared to insult him as old dog. And now they had nothing to do with the issue? How could there be such shameless people? None of you would be able to escape, the green-robed man said maliciously. His whole lower half was completely numb and he could not feel anything at all, so he had no idea if he was still a man. If he was really disabled as a man, then he would kill everyone here 3 times to vent his hatred. You still dare to open your mouth? Ling Han was very surprised and raised his foot once more. No. The green-robed man was terrified. This young man was practically a maniac. He obviously knew that he was from the Wu clan, and he still dared to attack him. Moreover, every move he made was extremely ruthless, so he was really terrified. Who asked him to be too heavily injured now that he could not even display an ounce of his real strength? But he swore that he would definitely break Ling Han's bones and throw his ashes to the winds. You're not behaving inside your heart. Ling Han said calmly. Hunyao immediately bared her teeth and growled, displaying her ferocious nature. The green-robed man felt his heart tighten. Compared to Ling Han, he was actually more fearful of Hunyao. This little girl was practically like a demonic beast in human form. You could still reason with humans, still threaten humans or bribe them, but what about demonic beasts? Mere words were completely useless. Just give up. Even if I beat you half to death, the seniors of your clan would only say that I did a good thing. Ling Han said calmly. Nonsense, the green-robed man immediately said disdainfully in his heart. Even the members of the Jiang clan were shaking their heads at this. That was absolutely impossible. The only way that could be possible was if Ling Han was actually the illegitimate son of the Rain Emperor. If he were, then he indeed could possibly make the Wu clan lower their heads in front of him. Zifeng, have you not settled the issue yet? It was at this moment that the voice of an old man was heard from outside. Chapter 169, Grandmaster Yuanshu who curries favor. Elder Qian Feng, the green-robed man and his two companions called out in unison, their voices filled with grief and indignation. How could they not? Usually, only they were able to bully others. Yet now, they were actually thrashed so completely by someone and stepped on today. This was practically enough to drive them insane. Outside the door, there stood two men. One was an elderly man who looked to be in his 60s. He was dressed in a red robe, his hair completely black and his face very smooth and unblemished. He did not look old at all. The other man was about the same age, and there were two silver-colored badges that hung on his chest. Anyone with a bit of general knowledge would know that this meant that the man was a black-grade middle-level alchemist. Obviously, one of the men was an elder of the Wu clan, Wu Qianfeng, while the other was Grandmaster Yuanshu Yuan. Greetings, Grandmaster Yuanshu. Greetings, Master Wu. The members of the Jiang clan and the others all stepped forwards to pay their respects. For them, these two were really very important people. Usually, it would be very difficult for them to see two men of such high status, but now, all of a sudden, they had met with two such important men. The overwhelming shock was more than enough to make their legs shiver. When Yuanshu saw eldest aunt and youngest aunt, he could not help but give a humph. An expression of extreme displeasure appeared on his face. These two shrews actually dared to insult him as old dog. For a proud alchemist, that was really an extraordinary shame and humiliation. I am not deserving of such respectful greetings from you, he said coldly. Actually, with his status, he would not deign to lower himself to the levels of two shrews like them, yet there was too much anger in his heart. If he could not even speak one or two words in mockery, there was no way he could vent this anger. From this aspect, eldest aunt and youngest aunt were really quite powerful, as they had actually managed to cause a black-grade middle-level alchemist to lose his composure. This was a feat that not many could boast of accomplishing. Grandmaster Yuanshu, we have been blind. Please forgive us and spare us for our insolence. Eldest aunt and youngest aunt both knelt on the floor. They continued to slap themselves as they sobbed endlessly. Yet Yuanshu was not moved at all. He said, "Didn't you say that there was someone here that could subdue me? I have come here now, so call him out." Jiang Fei Yan's father and the others were all dumbstruck as they realized how eldest aunt and youngest aunt managed to escape. They really were despicable. Just so they could live for a little while longer, they had implicated the rest of them in the trouble they had caused. Meanwhile, Wu Qianfeng had spotted the green-robed man. His face was completely ashen as he asked, "What is going on here? You all couldn't even capture the few people here?" Members of the Wu clan were actually so harshly thrashed by another, so much that even their teeth had been punched out. This was absolutely an act of challenging the authority of the Wu clan. The green-robed man and his two companions all lowered their heads in shame. How could they tell their clan's elder that they had been defeated by a little girl? Which master is here? Since you have made a move to punish my few unworthy juniors, why do you not show yourself to me? Wu Qianfeng swept his eyes over everyone here. The most powerful among them was only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so there was no one here that could possibly defeat Wu Zifeng. It's him. The green-robed man pointed at Ling Han. Him? Wu Qianfeng looked flabbergasted. This was only a junior merely in the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Had Wu Zifeng lost his mind? It's him, the green-robed man said through gritted teeth, veins on his forehead popping out in his fury. He used underhanded tricks to defeat me. I would like to ask Elder Qian Feng to act and punish him harshly on our behalf." When they heard his words, the members of the Jiang clan and the others all bore expressions of disdain. "You actually lost to a little girl, and you still dare to say that it was because your opponent had used underhanded tricks." "Oh." Wu Qianfeng placed his hands behind his back, and as his eyes fell on Ling Han, killing intent exuded from him. Whether or not Ling Han had used any kind of underhanded tricks, since he had dared to make a move against members of the Wu clan, that was more than enough to sentence him to death. "Brat, do you want to commit suicide, or wait for me to make the move?" he asked calmly. Sensing the killing intent emanating from the old man, Hunyo immediately pounced onto the ground. She raised her head slightly and bared her teeth, an alert expression coming over her face. Hunyo. Yuanshu's attention had been completely captured by eldest aunt and youngest aunt. In another way, these two shrews were indeed quite capable to be able to so thoroughly capture the attention of a grandmaster alchemist, so much that he had not noticed the others. It was only now that he had suddenly discovered that Hunyo was there. If Hunyo was here, then could it be? He hurriedly swept his eyes over his surroundings. When he spotted Ling Han, a bright smile suddenly appeared on his face. In an instant, he had raced over to Ling Han and bent down into a low bow as he said, "I did not know that young Master Han was here. Please forgive this Yuanshu for not coming out to greet you." Pooh. When they saw this scene, everyone else immediately choked. Hey, you are a black-grade middle-level alchemist, someone with extremely noble status. How could you put on such a bootlicking display? His smile was so bright that it was practically dazzling. Damn, he was toadying so much, it was so absolutely shameless of him. Eldest aunt and youngest aunt both gaped, their tongues out. Even their eyes looked to be in danger of popping out. Wasn't that the country bumpkin? Hadn't he come to join in their dinner on Jin Wuji's invitation? Why was it that even a noble alchemist like Grandmaster Yuanshu had to address him so respectfully as young Master Han? What was going on here? Wu Qianfeng was also shocked. He was very well aware what the identity of a black-grade middle-level alchemist implied, but even a person of such noble stature was behaving so reverently in front of Ling Han. This was practically unbelievable. Even if the head of the Wu clan himself was here, there was absolutely no way that Yuanshu would behave so submissively. Alchemists were a group of very proud people. If you wanted them to lower their heads to you, the only way to accomplish that would be to surpass them in terms of alchemy. But the problem here was, how old was Ling Han exactly? How could anyone believe that he was above Yuanshu in terms of alchemy skill? In that instant, the surroundings turned completely quiet. No one spoke a single word. Really, what kind of people are you getting yourself involved with? Ling Han frowned, looking very displeased. Wu Qianfeng wanted to fly into a rage at that moment. This was practically insulting them in a roundabout manner. If Ling Han was the grand elder of one of the great clans, he would not react. But a mere wet behind the ears brat like Ling Han actually dared to mock him right in front of his face. How could he endure such humiliation? Yes. It is all Yuanshu's fault for not seeing clearly enough. Please forgive my error, young Master Han. Who would have thought that Yuanshu would actually incessantly admit the error of his ways, his demeanor more and more humble, as if he was Ling Han's alchemy apprentice. Wu Qianfeng forcibly swallowed the words that were right on the tip of his tongue. Was Yuanshu an idiot? Of course not. Did Yuanshu have a high status? Of course. But even Yuanshu had to behave so cautiously and reverently, so how terrifying would Ling Han's real identity be? Wu Qianfeng was not a rash man. He immediately reconsidered the situation here. Forget it. Ling Han waved his hand, and beamed brightly at Wu Qianfeng as he said, I was the one who thrashed the members of your Wu clan, so what do you want to do now? What to do? Naturally to kill him in public as a warning to others. These were Wu Qianfeng's initial thoughts. But how could he dare to have such intentions now? Because Yuanshu was already looking at him in a very unfriendly manner. Obviously, if he dared to say one word about the matter, Yuan Shu would really become hostile immediately. He gave an internal sigh, and knew that he had lost the battle before it had even started. There was nothing he could do. Who asked him to have a request to make of Yuan Shu? Moreover, even if he had nothing to ask of Yuan Shu, his clan would definitely not dare to offend a black-grade middle-level alchemist either. Hee, young Master Han must be joking. These few guys must have offended young Master Han. Even if young Master Han did not make a move, would have taught them a lesson too, Wu Qianfeng laughed. He looked very natural and his demeanor didn't betray the slightest sign of his previous thoughts. What an old fox. Chapter 170, Unless you want Grandmaster Fu to act. The members of the Jiang clan felt like they were about to pass out from the absolute shock. First, it was Grandmaster Yuan Shu who put on a bootlicking display in front of Ling Han, and now, Wu Qianfeng looked completely supportive of Ling Han's actions. They really felt that their worldview had completely been shattered to pieces. But they were not idiots. For example, eldest aunt and youngest aunt had already been shocked sober from their drunken state. Now, their whole bodies were shivering as they recalled how they showed much disdain and disrespect to Ling Han. Who knows if he would be calling them to account for it. They were also filled with overwhelming regret. If they had known that Ling Han was actually such an awesome character, wouldn't it have been great if they had flattered him endlessly just now? Looking at the bootlicking display that Grandmaster Yuan Shu was showing now, he would agree even if he was commanded to address them as father. What more concocting a mere few furnaces worth of alchemical pills? Who had asked them to act so snobbishly earlier? Meanwhile, Yuan Shu asked angrily, young Master Han, what did they do? Oh, this guy called himself my father. Ling Han pointed at the green-robed man. Pooh, Wu Qianfeng almost leaped up in indignation. Martial artists were typically rough and coarse in their ways. It was very common for them to say things like, grandson, or your father. You actually gave them such a severe thrashing just because of something like that? Wasn't that a bit of an overreaction? Yet Yuan Shu's expression changed drastically, as he said, how dare you actually call yourself young Master Han's father? You deserve to die. Who was Ling Han? He was a real Grandmaster alchemist, and very soon, he would be able to possess the badge of a black-grade high-level alchemist. Moreover, those who had observed Ling Han's alchemy skills yesterday would know that Ling Han was able to concoct alchemical pills close to Earth grade. That meant that Ling Han actually already had 1 foot in the ranks of Earth grade alchemists. He was such a high-ranking, noble person. Who would be able to call himself Ling Han's father? Oh, if you'd become the father of an Earth grade alchemist, then wouldn't that mean black-grade alchemists like them would have become your grandsons, great-grandsons, or great-great-grandsons? Yuan Shu and the other alchemists had already long been subdued by Ling Han's impressive alchemy skills, and took him to be half their master. How could a disciple not be furious when their master was being insulted? He focused his gaze on the green-robed man and his 2 companions, and asked coldly, how do you want to die? Damn. Just calling yourself someone's father and it was a death sentence? Then how many people would need to die every day in Rain Country? The faces of the green-robed man and his 2 companions were completely dark. They were the real victims here, and they were so harshly thrashed that they had lost all their teeth. And now, they were actually being asked how they wanted to die. They really felt extremely wronged. This time, even Wu Qianfeng could no longer overlook the matter, and asked, Grandmaster Yuan Shu, isn't this going a bit too far? Too far? Yuan Shu smiled coldly, then let us go and see Grandmaster Fu Yuansheng, and see what Grandmaster Fu would say. However, I can guarantee that if Grandmaster Fu personally makes a move, then that would require a personal apology from the clan head of the Wu clan. When he had finished saying these words, a dead silence had fallen over the entire side courtyard. For the clan head of the Wu clan to make a personal apology, what kind of unbelievable concept was that? Even if this brat was Fu Yuansheng's own son, he would not dote on him to this extent. It was practically as if Fu Yuansheng was worshipping him like a son worshipped his father. Wu Qianfeng wiped off the layer of cold sweat on his forehead, and said, "Grandmaster Yuanshu, are you joking with me?" No matter how he looked at it, such a brat like Ling Han could not possibly be so capable. "You can gamble," Yuanshu said coldly. Wu Qianfeng could not help but hesitate. If Yuanshu was not exaggerating, then if matters advanced to the point that Fu Yuansheng would make a move, that would really be a very horrible thing. The question here was, could Yuanshu's words be believed? It was not likely that a black-grade alchemist would lie, but the words he had said were really too overwhelming. Wu Qianfeng really found it a very difficult thing to believe. He could not help but be stuck in a dilemma. Forget it. Just have them apologize, and this matter is over. Ling Han gave a wave of his hand in dismissal. Young Master Han is indeed magnanimous. Yuanshu quickly flattered. This was being magnanimous? He thrashed them and still wanted them to apologize. How could someone be as overbearing as that? Wu Qianfeng finally sighed. He decided to admit his loss as he had a request to make of Yuanshu. That was the reason why he had invited Yuanshu to dinner here in the first place, but he had never thought that things would turn out this way. Actually, he was really innocent in all of this. It had been those two shrews who had made trouble in the first place, and that was why he had told his clansmen to stand up for Yuanshu. He never thought that he would crash into a hard wall like Ling Han. "Zifeng, apologize to young Master Han," he said to the green-robed man, forcing down the flames of rage burning in his heart. The green-robed man felt an indescribable fury fill his whole body. His hands were tightly curled into fists. He really wanted to give Ling Han a thrashing of his own, but when he saw the threatening look Wu Qianfeng was directing at him, he could not help but lower his head, and forced out through gritted teeth, "I was wrong. Please forgive me, young Master Han." Ling Han smiled faintly and calmly accepted the apology. He did not have much of a good impression of the Wu clan. There was a Wu Bo among their ranks that he was definitely going to kill off one day. "Grandmaster Yuanshu, about that clashing yang pill," Wu Qianfeng said to Yuanshu submissively. "Hang, after such a thing has happened, you still want me to help you concoct the clashing yang pill?" Yuanshu glared, refusing without any slight bit of hesitation. There was a layer of cold sweat on Wu Qianfeng's forehead as he said, "Grandmaster Yuanshu, you can't go back on your word. I don't want to concoct alchemical pills for your Wu clan." "So what?" Yuanshu said shamelessly. "You." Wu Qianfeng pointed a trembling finger at Yuanshu, but could not say anything else. Yuanshu was in spiritual ocean tier like him, and merely due to his status as a black-grade middle-level alchemist, he dared not say any threatening words. Ling Han's eyes swept over him, and could not help but feel a slight shock. He asked, "Old Wu, why do you need to concoct the clashing yang pill?" Old Wu? Wu Qianfeng almost rushed over to slap him. He was an elite warrior in spiritual ocean tier and was more than old enough to become Ling Han's grandfather. Yet Ling Han actually addressed him as Old Wu. How could he tolerate such humiliation? However, in Ling Han's eyes, for a martial artist of merely spiritual ocean tier and an old man in his 60s, he had given him enough face by not calling him Little Wu. Young Master Han, one of his legs is suspected to have been bitten by an extremely poisonous snake. Thus, he needs the clashing yang pill to heal his poison, Yuanshu immediately explained. Ling Han looked over and saw that Wu Qianfeng's left leg was obviously much thicker than his right leg. He was very curious, and said, "Pull up your pant leg and show me." Wu Qianfeng immediately looked displeased. "Are you commanding me?" Meanwhile, Yuanshu said calmly, "Young Master Han's alchemy skills is above even mine. It would be extremely tough for me to concoct this clashing yang pill, but for young Master Han, it would be a piece of cake. Young Master Han, please take a look." Wu Qianfeng did not say another word and immediately pulled up his pant leg. The speed at which he changed his attitude was enough to make everyone dumbstruck. They also felt like they were going to faint. So an elite of spiritual ocean tier and a member of one of the 8 great clans could act so shamelessly too. A very strange smell wafted out. It smelt a bit like iron, and upon a closer look, Wu Qianfeng's left leg was not only very swollen, it was also as black as ink. From the looks of it, it definitely looked like he had been poisoned by some strange venom. Ling Han pressed lightly with a finger on Wu Qianfeng's thigh, and asked, "Do you still remember how you were bitten?" "I was exploring an ancient tomb when I found something black. Just when I was about to pick it up to take a closer look, it suddenly shot forwards and bit my leg. After that, it completely vanished," Wu Qianfeng answered. Ling Han smiled, and said, "I can help you solve your problem." "Oh really?" Wu Qianfeng was instantly excited. "Since young Master Han has said so, how could it be that he would lie to you?" Yuan Shu immediately humphed in displeasure. "Hee, I was just excited. Please bear with me, young Master Han," Wu Qianfeng said with a smile full of flattery. There was not a single hint of his earlier pride in his current demeanor. Chapter 171, Treatment. Ling Han did not take it to heart. There was a flash of delight in his eyes that no one else noticed. It was not a snake that had bitten Wu Qianfeng, but a treasure. Of course, he could not confirm it yet. However, he was quite sure that it was the case. "Come, change your position and lay your leg down flat," Ling Han instructed. Wu Qianfeng quickly sat down and laid his leg down on another chair. He then looked at Ling Han anxiously. There was no way that a great alchemist like Yuan Shu would make empty boasts. Thus, when he said that Ling Han's alchemy skills were even above his, then that had to be the truth, even if that was a very astonishing fact that he really couldn't believe. Everyone else now had become minor characters as they all directed their stares at Ling Han, an unbelievably young man with unbelievable skills. Ling Han did not feel uncomfortable at all. In his last life, he was already long used to becoming the focus of everyone's attention. What he wanted now was to confirm the idea he had in his mind. He stretched out a hand and tapped repeatedly on Wu Qianfeng's leg. After every few taps, he would stop and observe for a moment. After a moment, a confident smile came over his face as he said, "Old Wu, I'm going to start the treatment now. However, it will be very painful. Please don't worry, young Master Han. I am a practitioner of martial arts, so what hardships have I not experienced before? Please do as you like, young Master Han." "I can, Wu Qianfeng was just getting impassioned talking about his pain tolerance when all of a sudden, he let out an agonized yell. A powerful crimson flame suddenly appeared on Ling Han's palm that transformed into a sharp point that was currently burning Wu Qianfeng's skin. Yuan Shu was watching from the side, and sighed ruefully. Young Master Han is indeed extremely fortunate to be able to fuse with a strange fire. I am about to die from envy. In front of Ling Han, there was naturally no need for him to act all high and mighty. Strange fire. When the others heard this, the majority of them were confused. Only Wu Qianfeng looked astonished. He naturally knew what strange fire was. This thing was extremely rare, and by itself, it possessed great power. But to actually refine it? Sorry, even the current Rain Emperor may not be able to accomplish such an extraordinary feat. Perhaps only that mysterious old monster from the Qi clan would be able to subdue a strange fire. Ling Han was only an element gathering tier. How had he managed such a feat? Wu Qianfeng definitely did not believe that Ling Han had managed to fuse with a strange fire all on his own ability. Then it was very simple. It must have been the master behind Ling Han or his clan that had helped him to fuse with a strange fire. A party that could retrieve a strange fire and allow one of their juniors to fuse with it. How abominably generous was that? As his thoughts turned in this direction, Wu Qianfeng could not help but feel gratitude towards Yuan Shu. The matter just now had become too serious. Putting aside the problem of his treatment, merely Ling Han's terrifying background was not something that the Wu clan would be able to stand against. His thoughts flashed through his mind, and he once again released a horrible scream. Just now, he had been distracted and had managed to momentarily forget the agonizing pain. But now, the pain made a comeback, driving him practically crazy enough that he wanted to beat someone up. Hiss. The people surrounding them all revealed expressions of utter shock, because they actually saw one vein after another all reveal themselves on Wu Qianfeng's leg. Upon a closer look, these veins were actually continuously twisting around as if they were a group of very slender snakes. Ling Han gave a humph. His fingers continuously touched, pressed and pushed. With the burning of the flames, these slender snakes kept retreating and finally converged around the ankle. Wu Qianfeng's thigh was visibly regaining the color of normal skin at a detectable speed. As the black color continuously moved downwards, it became darker and darker, as if it was about to turn solid and gush out of his leg. It was really very strange. However, Wu Qianfeng looked elated at this. Even if he was an idiot, he could tell that Ling Han did have his ways, and was slowly forcing the poison in his body to accumulate in his foot. But it was really painful. Very painful. Extremely painful. As a spiritual ocean tier elite, Wu Qianfeng still had a very high pain tolerance. By now, he could already force himself not to let out any moans of pain. However, layer after layer of cold sweat appeared on his skin, and both his legs were endlessly quivering. By this point, all the black color had converged into the sole of his foot. Ling Han drew his sword, and said, "Old Wu, I have now forced all the poison into your left foot. Everything would be all right after I amputate your foot. Is that fine?" "Fine, your sister. This is one of my feet we're talking about here." Wu Qianfeng mocked internally. However, he had visited many doctors previously, and they had all advised him to amputate his whole left leg to be able to preserve his life. In comparison, merely cutting off his left foot was already a much better bargain. After all, his life was important, and it would only become more and more troublesome if he continued to drag it out. Young Master Han, please do it," Wu Qianfeng said, gritting his teeth. Ling Han drew his sword, and shwa, a cold flash passed. Immediately, black-colored blood sprayed out. He did not cut off Wu Qianfeng's foot, but merely made an incision in the sole of his foot to let out blood. With the continuous urging of the strange fire, black blood gushed out endlessly. "Here it comes." Ling Han's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly dropped his sword and stretched out a hand towards the fountain of black blood. Then, he immediately drew back his hand. No one noticed that there was an additional something in his hand, because he had immediately stored the item into the spatial ring. The black blood was continuously forced out, and very quickly, Wu Qianfeng's left leg had completely returned to normal. However, it still looked a bit pale. After all, Wu Qianfeng had lost a lot of blood. "It's done," Ling Han said. Wu Qianfeng sensed for a moment, and an expression of uncontrollable elation appeared on his face. He hurriedly stood and raised his clasped hands in Ling Han's direction and said, "Many thanks, young Master Han. Many thanks, young Master Han." This venom had troubled him for many years. There was no hint of recovery even after he had taken many different types of medicine that were supposed to heal poison. Every day, he had to use his origin power to suppress the poison. If not, the poison would make its way upwards and absorb his blood. If it was not because of this poison, he would not still be in the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier now. Instead, he would have managed to reach the 9th layer, with a high chance to break through to spiritual pedestal tier. If the clashing yang pill still had no effects, he was indeed preparing to give up his left leg. After all, a living man who had lost a leg was still much better than a dead man who had all his limbs. He had never thought that Ling Han would so easily manage to solve a problem that had troubled him for almost 10 years. Amazing. Cover up that hairy leg of yours. Do you think it looks very nice? Ling Han said disdainfully. By now, Wu Qianfeng's leg was scorched black in some places, and those places that were not burnt were covered with body hair. It was indeed a disgusting sight. Yes. Yes. Wu Qianfeng was currently very elated, so he ignored Ling Han's extremely rude tone. All right. You may go now. Ling Han flicked his hand, and issued the command for them to leave. Yes. Wu Qianfeng quickly raised his clasped hands in farewell. As he continuously made his apologies to the members of the Jiang clan, he picked up the 3 juniors of his clan. Since the poison was now cured, he naturally did not need to beg Yuan Shu for any favors. Thus, he directly returned home. You return too, Ling Han said to Yuan Shu. Yes, young Master Han. At first, Yuan Shu was planning to flatter him a bit more, but when he recalled that Ling Han was currently staying in the Imperial City and would definitely come over to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion frequently, he did not continue to bother him and took his leave. Now that the outsiders were gone, the members of the Jiang clan all looked at Ling Han with reverence. Ling Han smiled, and asked, What is it? Do you not know me anymore? I do indeed feel like I don't know you anymore, Jin Wuji said with a bitter smile. Even Grandmaster Yuan Shu and Master Wu had to show you utmost respect. I am really at a loss what to do. How about if I call you young Master Han as well? Go to hell. Ling Han laughed loudly. Do you not take me as a friend? All of a sudden, Jin Wuji felt a warmth spread out in his heart. Chapter 172, Blood-Sucking Origin Gold. Becoming friends with Ling Han before and later, the significance of the 2 scenarios were completely different. Even a black-grade middle-level alchemist had to address Ling Han respectfully as young Master Han. What an honor it was to be able to become Ling Han's friend. Jiang Fei Yan's parents and Jiang Fei Yan herself were all extraordinarily delighted by his words. Meanwhile, eldest aunt and youngest aunt both shamelessly approached Ling Han. Eldest aunt said, Young Master Han, my Hualien and Yuaner are both good boys. They will definitely be able to become good friends with young Master Han. That's right, that's right. You can all become good friends, youngest aunt hurriedly continued. They were really without any sense of shame. Ling Han asked calmly, Do I know you? Eldest aunt and youngest aunt were instantly struck speechless by his question. If it was just a moment ago, they would definitely have bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Yet now, they dared not say even one word. Instead, they continued to signal at Jiang Fei Yan with their eyes, hoping that she could speak up on their behalf. If their sons could become good friends with Ling Han, then wouldn't that mean that they would be able to do as they liked in this imperial city? You all can get lost now. Ling Han said impatiently. How could eldest aunt and youngest aunt give up as easily as that? They simply pretended that they had not heard him, and planned to continue pestering Ling Han. Ling Han smiled coldly, and said, Or do you want me to invite Wu Qianfeng and Yuan Shu back to call an account to your old debts? Sparing them once was already him giving face to Jin Wuji. If not, he would have given them both a well-deserved slap long ago. Hearing his threat, eldest aunt and youngest aunt could only reluctantly leave with their sons in tow. Ling Han retook his seat and continued to drink with Jin Wuji and the rest for a while before taking his leave. Firstly, the atmosphere was not too comfortable. His status had all of a sudden shot up to such formidable heights that it caused Jin Wuji and the others to behave very reservedly in his company. Secondly, he was also in a rush to return and study the item that he had gotten from Wu Qianfeng. With Hu Niu in tow, Ling Han very quickly returned to the academy. Faced with a challenging look from Lu Ru'er, he closed the door to his room. With a single thought from him, an item immediately appeared from within the spatial ring. It was a very black thing, thin and long. Once it appeared, it actually moved a little before quickly shooting towards Ling Han, as if it was an arrow shot from a bow. The thing was extremely fast, so fast that even Wu Qianfeng could not defend himself against it, causing him to stagnate at the current cultivation level for a period of 10 years. This more than showed how fast it could be. Even an elite warrior of the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier was not spared, What more Lin Han, who was merely in the 7th layer of element gathering tier? Xiao, the thing had already shot to Ling Han's waist, and was actually about to penetrate his body through his waist. Hung. Ling Han's face turned cold, and suddenly, a burst of crimson flame erupted from his waist. How dare you? Since I had the ability to force you out, how could it be possible that I would be afraid of you? The thing continued to shoot in various directions, still intending to create a hole on Ling Han's body to allow it to enter his body. However, its attempts were repeatedly blocked by the strange fire, and it was finally captured by Ling Han once again. Hong, the strange fire came forth and began burning the thing. The thing continued to twist around and struggle. It actually transformed from its initial long, thin shape to the shape of a block, then transformed into the form of a sword, then a saber, and so on. It was an amazing sight. So it is indeed blood-sucking origin gold. Ling Han smiled. The blood-sucking origin gold was not a demonic beast nor any kind of living organism. In fact, it was a unique kind of metal. However, this metal was extremely strange because it loved to suck and devour blood, as if it had a life of its own. Not even Ling Han possessed a detailed knowledge of this thing. But, someone had once guessed before that when this strange metal absorbed a sufficient amount of blood strong enough, it might be able to open the door to life and become a completely new life form. And the greatest advantage of this metal was that it could freely change its form. Once it was forged into a weapon, the weapon would be able to change into uncountable forms. In Ling Han's last life, the slashing sun saber, the weapon of one of the 7 ultimate warriors of heaven tier, the setting sun saber emperor, was forged precisely from this blood-sucking origin gold. In battle, the treasured saber would be able to continuously absorb the blood of powerful warriors to endlessly increase its power. It was practically able to compare to the might of an ultimate warrior of heaven tier on its own. That was how terrifying it could be. However, this block of blood-sucking origin gold was much too small to forge it into a weapon. Still, there would be no problems in using it to make a key. Since it could freely change its shape, that meant that it would be able to become a key that could open any lock in this world. That wasn't awesome enough? In his last life, Ling Han had only seen the blood-sucking origin gold in the hands of the setting sun saber emperor, but when he'd heard Wu Qianfeng's story, he deduced the identity of the snake. Otherwise, how could he have treated the ailment of a member of the Wu clan without any reason? Thankfully, he was not disappointed. Yaya. The strange fire sent a blurry thought to Ling Han. It actually wanted to continue melting this block of metal. Ling Han could somewhat sense that the strange fire felt disdain towards the blood-sucking origin gold. It was really strange. Once it was melted, would the strange fire be able to gain the transformation trait of the blood-sucking origin gold? But if he did not melt it down, the thing would not listen to him at all. Its bloodthirsty nature was overwhelming. It was appropriate to forge a weapon from it, but it was definitely not recommended to forge it into a key. Burn and melt it down, he'll just have to see if that would be able to erase its bloodthirsty nature. Ling Han made his decision and allowed the strange fire to continuously refine this block of blood-sucking origin gold. However, since the blood-sucking origin gold could gain the favor of the setting sun saber emperor who used it to forge his own weapon, it did indeed have a very high tolerance against heat. It only became slightly red under the furious burning of the strange fire, but did not melt at all. If it was not for the fact that fire was strong against metal, Ling Han probably would not be able to do anything to it. Then he'd just have to slowly melt it down. He did not believe that he would be unable to subdue a block of metal. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position and stimulated the origin power in his body, transforming it into heat that helped in the refining process of the blood-sucking origin gold. Slowly, this block of unique metal began to become softer and softer, and gradually looked like it would be turning into liquid. That slashing sun saber of the setting sun saber emperor was far above this level. That treasured saber was practically invincible against all external damage. Even the sword emperor who had learnt sword heart and claimed to be able to slice the heavens and the earth apart with a single wave of his sword could not break it in half. That proved how extraordinary a substance it was. The reason for this should be because the blood-sucking origin gold had the ability to grow. It would be able to become stronger through the continuous absorption of blood. Currently, this block of blood-sucking origin gold had not absorbed too much blood. As a result, it could not do anything against even a martial artist of the 7th layer of spiritual ocean tier. A whole 10 years, and it still had not managed to completely absorb the blood of its victim, which was proof enough of its weakness. Otherwise, if it was that slashing sun saber of the setting sun saber emperor, then Ling Han would definitely have turned and fled in the opposite direction. How could he stand against that demonic thing with his current ability? The block of metal continued to change shapes, and had even transformed into the shape of a tiny human being that roared silently. This would cause anyone to suspect if it was actually a metal that had a life of its own. However, living organisms could not be stored into the spatial ring, so it was confirmed that the blood-sucking origin gold was an inanimate object. Anyways, it was just very strange. After melting it down for a whole day and night, the block of blood-sucking origin gold finally became a pool of liquid and no longer changed forms. Ling Han's face turned serious, and he began to extend his divine sense into the blood-sucking origin gold. To make the blood-sucking origin gold take a form of his choosing, he would have to use his divine sense to penetrate into it. It was equivalent to smelting and forging the blood-sucking origin gold like it was a spirit weapon. Ling Han's divine sense suddenly entered into a world of complete darkness. The furious sounds of battle roared in his ears. As the sight in front of him became lighter, he saw uncountable people all attacking a giant in front of him. The giant stood firm and sturdy, and there was a metallic sheen all over its body. It was extremely hard, because even with the combined attacks of a few thousand people, there only appeared slight depressions on its body, which immediately turned back to normal. It was as if the depressions were made by fingers lightly pressing down on its body. Ling Han was shocked the body of this giant was completely made from the blood-sucking origin gold. Chapter 173, A State of Enlightenment. Even with the might the setting sun saber emperor had, he had only managed to obtain a block of blood-sucking origin gold that was about the size of a human head. Had forged it into his famous weapon, the slashing sun saber, on which he relied to become the 3rd strongest existence among the 7 ultimate warriors of heaven tier. But there actually appeared a firm and sturdy giant here that was completely made from the blood-sucking origin gold. Wasn't that a terrifying fact? Ling Han had guessed before that once this blood-sucking origin gold had managed to absorb enough blood, it would be able to transform into a living being, but he had never imagined that there would appear such a terrifying giant. There were millions of martial artists ganging up on this giant of blood-sucking origin gold. Their combined attacks shot towards it like they were shooting stars and continuously blasted against the body of the giant. But there were very few attacks that could actually break through its defenses. Even those few attacks that managed to get through its defenses only managed to leave behind light marks on its body. However, the counterattack of the giant of origin gold was really too horrifying. It only opened its mouth and would be able to swallow down a large number of martial artists. It then closed its mouth, and a crisp kacha was heard. It had actually swallowed the human martial artists whole. Since these martial artists could soar in the skies, they had definitely reached at least the level of flower blossoming tier, and based on Ling Han's observation, some of them were even above this level and could match him in ability in his last life. A few of these powerful martial artists were even above his level in his last life. Shattering void tier. It was at this moment that the images came to a sudden stop. Ling Han's vision changed and he had once again returned to his own room. That flash of images previously should have been the remaining pieces of memory remaining in this block of blood-sucking origin gold. However, because it was just a shattered piece, there was only a short flash of images. Ling Han could not help but engage in deduction. The giant of origin gold was finally defeated and shattered by the combined attacks of uncountable powerful warriors, and now its pieces were scattered all over the world. The blood-sucking origin gold was filled with the ability to absorb blood. Could it be that the giant was planning on making a comeback? Though he had only witnessed a short flash of memories, when he recalled that the giant of blood-sucking origin gold was something that could attract so many martial artists to work together and attack it. That was definitely proof of its unbelievable might and power. There were even a few ultimate warriors of shattering void tier mixed in the fray. If this thing could still come back to life, then who in this world would be able to stop it? That would definitely be a scene of total death and carnage. However, this should have happened in an ancient historical time. Merely from the scene that Ling Han had witnessed, there were hundreds of elite warriors in Heaven tier, and there were no less than 5 ultimate warriors of shattering void tier. How the world of martial arts must have prospered then. Hold on, Jiang Yufeng and at least about 100 of elite warriors of Heaven tier had also battled an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier to death. That was not far from his current time period. It was as if the field of martial arts suddenly experienced a boom, and all of a sudden, many people managed to break through to Heaven tier. Ling Han was even more curious, and wanted to know about what had actually happened in that period of history. However, Rain Country had only been established for a few thousand years, and before that, it seemed as if there was a blank space in history. No one knew how the world was like before that. Looks like he would have to leave Rain Country and step into the wider world to be able to find out what had happened during that unknown period of history. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts. It was pointless to ponder further about it. What could his current cultivation level of merely the 7th layer of element gathering tier do? If there was really any kind of major catastrophe, there would be someone else stronger stepping up to the fore. Rain Country was only a small place, so the strongest existence here was only in flower blossoming tier. Who knows, when he left this place, it may not be a strange thing for him to hear of people who had actually reached the level of shattering void tier. The world changed and the field of martial arts was also constantly changing. There were times of prosperity, and there were also times of decline. A mental command from him, and the blood-sucking origin gold instantly transformed into various shapes with the stimulation of his mental commands. It could transform into metallic threads that were as thin as a spider's thread. It could also transform into metallic sheets that were thinner than even paper. It could also transform into the shape of a pig, goat, chicken, dog, and various other animals, though they were all tiny in size. Moreover, through the refining process of the strange fire, the blood-sucking origin gold had become even tougher and more durable. Even elites of spiritual pedestal tier would probably find it difficult to tear it apart. If he actually managed to coil it around the neck and give it a tug in a surprise attack, then even elite warriors of spiritual pedestal tier may die. He formed the blood-sucking origin gold into the shape of a bangle and placed it on his left wrist. When he came out of his room, Hunyao instantly clung onto him and rubbed her little head on his chest, and said, "Mean." Ling Han mean. How am I mean? Ling Han asked, smiling. You don't play with Niao. The little girl pouted. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, all right. Then I'll just have to play with you for a while, all right? The play that Hunyao was saying was actually wrestling. It must have been taught by her mother tiger when she had still been in the tiger's den. Every move and stance, every attack and retreat were all signature moves of a tiger on the hunt for its prey. However, Hunyao possessed a terrifying comprehension ability in martial arts, and managed to adapt the moves that were not suitable to be used by human beings to her own use. The little girl was like a little tiger. She would pounce, smack, bite, and throw. Every move possessed a terrifying power behind it. Ling Han could not help but watch in captivation. There was no limit and restriction to the form of martial arts in the first place. Who had decided that a beast could not become a master and teach one martial arts? On the other hand, the ape's arm fists, tiger form palms, and others, weren't they all martial arts techniques that had been invented based on their ancestors' observation of the attacks of other animals? All of a sudden, his thoughts spread out, and his mindset was freed to a far-reaching world. He had entered a state of enlightenment. Enlightenment was a special condition that martial artists desperately desired to experience. Under this condition, they could possibly comprehend certain dilemmas of martial arts that they normally would not have been able to comprehend, and their level of martial arts may soar. However, this condition could only be encountered by chance, and not brought about consciously. According to deduction, it required the consciousness of a martial artist to be coordinated with the heavens and earth, so it was extremely mysterious. If a martial artist managed to enter the state of enlightenment once in his lifetime, that would be enough for him to thank the gods for this gift. Moreover, it would normally happen after one had reached flower blossoming tier, because only those who had cast off their mortal bodies would be qualified to achieve unity with the Tao of heaven and earth. In his last life, Ling Han had experienced enlightenment 3 times in total, but he had only managed to experience breakthroughs in alchemy. And the first time he experienced it was when he was in spiritual ocean tier. At that time, he was unbearably shocked, but he had never thought that it would appear even earlier in this lifetime. The surrounding spiritual chi all around him converged upon him, as if it had turned into multiple dragons that were furiously squeezing into his body. His cultivation level immediately began to spike, from the middle period of the 7th layer of element gathering tier to the late period, and then to the peak period. He did not have any problems with comprehension of his cultivation level at all. He merely experienced a slight pause and the door to the 8th layer of element gathering tier was open to him. Breaking through was that easy for him. Ling Han had not noticed at all. His heart and spirit were soaring in the world of martial arts. Every single bit of comprehension bloomed in front of him as if they were flowers. But when he reached out his hands to capture them, they immediately shattered into shadows. Illusion flowers flying in the air, or so he has heard. In the air, there were also multiple flashes of mysterious essences of martial arts flying past like they were shooting stars. Yet these were even harder to catch hold of. These were the Tao of nature, and were not something that the current Ling Han would be able to comprehend at all. If it was not for the fact that he had the support of his status as an elite warrior of heaven tier from his last life, he would only be at a complete loss in this world of martial arts. Yet now, he had managed to catch a glimpse of the mysteries of martial arts. From the early period of the 8th layer of element gathering tier to the middle period, to the late period, to the peak period. He used a mere few hours to accumulate the energy that he would have needed to accumulate over quite a considerable number of days. He did not even need to take any alchemical pills at all, it was as if the heavens had directly contributed to his advancement. As the saying goes, once you understood Tao, you would be granted salvation. Of course, Ling Han was still very far from reaching this level, but his advancement was more than enough to attract the jealousy of others. Hong, his body gave a slight tremble and he had stepped into the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Han's eyes suddenly snapped open. At first, he looked slightly confused, but then came back to reality. He could not help but smile. He turned around to see that Hu Niu was seated by his side, imitating his posture, as if she was also cultivating. There was actually a sliver of seriousness on her little face. Pang, pang, pang. It was at this moment that a hurried knocking was heard from the door. Chapter 174, Feng Luo's Act of Violence. Ling Han went over to open the door and saw that it was Zhu Shui at the door. She was currently in a great state of anxiety and panic. Big brother Ling. Zhu Shui immediately greeted, as if she had finally managed to gain a pillar of support the moment her eyes set upon Ling Han. Instantly, her worried demeanor relaxed considerably. What's happened? Ling Han asked. The academy expelled Li Hao. Zhu Shui said furiously. What? Ling Han frowned. Has he committed some crime? No. Zhu Shui shook her head, and forced out through gritted teeth, it's Feng Luo. He brought with him a teacher of the academy, and expelled Li Hao from the academy for no reason at all. He even said that it was because Li Hao was a friend of Big Brother Ling. Instantly, Ling Han's eyes became as sharp as swords, as rage slowly rose in his heart. Feng Luo is really out of control. He had his lackeys injure Li Hao and force him to lower his head, and the teacher from the academy actually pretended he had not seen anything at all. When I saw things were getting worse, I immediately rushed over to you and hoped that you can uphold the justice for Li Hao. Zhu Shui said, crying. If he was really expelled from the academy, then Li Hao would never be able to hold his head high again when he returned. Moreover, his future prospects would become extremely limited. Ling Han revealed a strong fury in his demeanor. He had already expected that Feng Yan and his brother would seek him out for revenge, and he did not have any fear. As a martial artist, how could it be possible if he would not offend a few people in his lifetime? Yet Feng Luo actually targeted his friends. That was too shameless. Whatever the enmity, family members should never be dragged into the matter. That was the unwritten rule of martial artists. Unless it was some kind of life or death enmity that could not be dissolved, only then would one actually make the move to eliminate the whole clan of his foe, or even include anyone else that had the slightest bit of relation to him. The enmity between him and Feng Luo, at best, was only a minor conflict. Bring me to them. Ling Han said darkly. Zhu Shui was delighted, and hurriedly brought Ling Han with her to Li Hao's quarters. She had seen how the third imperial prince and his guests had treated Ling Han at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, so she believed that if Ling Han were to act, then things could still be redeemed. The two of them were in a rush, so very quickly, they arrived at the students' hostel. This was where the ordinary disciples lived. Unlike true disciples, who had a courtyard to themselves, a few ordinary disciples would share a single courtyard, and the treatment was completely different. Feng Luo had made a comeback and was unbearably arrogant, making no attempts to hide his actions at all. On the other hand, he wanted nothing more than to inform everyone in the academy of it, to let them see how impressive and mighty he was now. Thus, there was a large number of people watching the scene. Some were sympathetic, some were rejoicing in Li Hao's misfortune, while others were completely indifferent. Any circle would be able to show the multiple facets of human nature. In the middle of the crowd, Li Hao was already covered with injuries and lying on the ground. Feng Luo had one foot firmly stepping on Li Hao's face, and Li Hao's fingers were visibly entrenched deeply into the ground beneath him. It was obvious to the rest how furious he was at this moment. Ling Han's eyes were like swords of ice. As he strode forwards, those around seemed to be able to sense his current rage. They turned around, and when they saw the icy expression on his face, they subconsciously retreated a few steps, and opened up a path for him to pass through. This also included the few students who were in gushing spring tear. They were both surprised and confused about how they could be scared off by a fellow student merely in element-gathering tear. The crowd separated like flowing water, and a direct path to the center of the crowd appeared. Feng Luo immediately turned around and looked to find that it was Ling Han. A sliver of arrogance appeared on his face. He smiled cockily, and said, "Ling Han, did you see, I have returned." Ling Han did not say anything. He merely continued his advance without pause. "Ha ha ha, are you extremely displeased? So what if you are? I want you to be very displeased." Feng Luo smirked coldly, and deliberately rubbed his foot on Li Hao's face a few times. "This is your friend? Then I'm really sorry. I did everything on purpose." "Don't say that I didn't give him a chance," Feng Luo shrugged, and continued, "I told him that as long as he cut off all relations with you from now onwards, and announced all the evil acts and crimes you have committed in public, then I would let him off. Who knew that this brat would be so stubborn and so stupidly loyal that he was actually not willing to betray you? The kind of person I hate the most would be this kind of unreasonable idiot, so I could only thrash him until he will admit the error of his ways. Don't worry, there could not be so many idiots in this world. In future, I will go seek out Li Dongyu, Jin Wuji, and the others, and I believe that they would not be as stupid as this." Feng Luo paused, and when he saw the ice-cold expression on Ling Han's face, he felt great delight. The more humiliated Ling Han was, the happier he would be. In fact, he wanted nothing more than to give a few furious stomps on that face of his. "What is it? Do you want to step on me? Unfortunately, you will not be able to. Just take a look, my brother had his 4 great guardian deities come over to become my guards, and all of them are in gushing spring tear. Forcing you into submission would be a piece of cake for them. Everyone here is the same. I can beat up anyone I don't like the look of, but none of them would dare to touch a single hair on my head. Come and beat me up, you idiot. If you have the balls to, come thrash me. Feng Luo laughed loudly, obviously very pleased with himself. He did not have any reservations about entering into mocking everyone mode. At this, quite a few people looked furious. It was necessary for rules to be in place in order to restrict anyone's actions at any time. That way, there would be a limit to how far they would go. Yet Feng Luo actually broke these rules. She would be able to thrash anyone he liked. Who would be able to feel safe again? Still, where did he get such overwhelming confidence from? One had to know that even the members of the main branch of the 8 great clans would not dare to say such words, and the imperial family of Rain Country would not say something like that either, as they were the ones who decided the rules, so how could they break their own rules so publicly? What basis did Feng Luo have to say these words? One had to understand that not even Feng Yan was much of anything in the vicinity of the imperial city, what more this kind of spoilt profligate. Hee, don't glare at me like that. I'm very scared. Feng Luo deliberately made a fearful face, but he immediately glared and stomped harshly on Li Hao. Damn, who do you think you are? You're just a lowly dog from Grey Cloud Town, and you still dare to abuse your power in front of me? Today, I will let you understand that opposing me was the most idiotic choice that you have made in this lifetime. I want you to watch as your friend, because of his relationship with you, has his arm crippled by me, and become a cripple forever. After saying so coldly, his right hand holding a sword, his eyes fixed upon Li Hao's right arm, obviously intending to cripple this arm of Li Hao's. For a saber wielder, having the arm that wielded his saber crippled would mean that he would become an absolute cripple. Everyone was shocked. This was the Huyang Academy, and there was obviously a teacher present here, yet Feng Luo actually dared to commit such a violent crime so publicly in front of everyone. Could it be that his Feng clan had become the boss of the academy? Ha 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 ha. Feng Luo laughed loudly, raised his sword and lowered it in a slash. Li Hao. Zhu Shui screamed shrilly, grief-stricken. She was filled with anguish, and had already spat out a mouthful of blood in her emotional turmoil. Xiao, it was at this moment that Ling Han moved swiftly, and his figure shot towards Feng Luo. Get lost. Those 4 young men standing behind Feng Luo all made their own moves. 4 hands attacked in unison, origin power rolled out in a powerful wave, and became 4 huge palms that aimed towards Ling Han. They were 4 elites of Gushing Spring Tier even though all of them were only in the first layer. However, Gushing Spring Tier would still be Gushing Spring Tier, and would be able to completely suppress an opponent who was merely an element gathering tier, what more when there were 4 of them. Even if they had not used any kind of martial arts technique in their attacks, they were still incomparably powerful. Chapter 175, Ling Han's Rage. A frosty aura emanated from Ling Han as he stepped forwards to parry the attacks of these 4 men. Was he seeking death? The combined attacks of 4 elites of Gushing Spring Tier caused someone who was merely an element gathering tier to actually neither dodge or avoid, but step forwards to receive their attacks head-on. Where did he get such courage from? Peng, 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 peng. A series of blasts were heard and instantly, the expressions of the observers became utterly astonished. They could only watch as 4 figures were flung outwards from a heavy impact. And who could these 4 figures be but the 4 guardian deities of Feng Yan? Ling Han did not even pause, and had already arrived at a spot right above Feng Luo's head. Pa, and his foot was firmly stomped onto Feng Luo's head. Tong! A muffled sound was heard and Feng Luo's entire head was firmly pressed into the ground. He was forced to kneel on the ground while his arms were helplessly hanging by his sides and his bottom was raised high, as if it was a chrysanthemum flower about to blossom. Wah! Ling Han's figure dropped down onto the ground, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. That was not because he had been injured by the 4 guardian deities. In fact, it was because he had injured himself when he had stepped out earlier on in order to stimulate the lone wolf's blood. He had not had the chance to spit it out earlier on. Dead silence filled the air. A martial artist in element gathering tier actually defeated 4 elites of gushing spring tier. Who could actually believe such a feat was possible? Who could accept such a reality? Though Ling Han had indeed suffered some injury and spat out blood, this could not in any way conceal his radiance. That was too awesome, wasn't it? Ling Han finally smiled calmly and said, now that there is no longer a fly noisily buzzing around, the world has indeed become much more peaceful and quieter. Li Hao. Zhu Shui had covered her face earlier, as she could not bear to watch as Li Hao was crippled at Feng Luo's hands. But when she heard the astonished gasps of those around her, she opened her eyes and saw that not only was Li Hao not injured, even Feng Luo was subdued. She could not help but be overjoyed at the turn of events, and rushed over to him. Ling Han helped Li Hao up, and said, I've involved you in this matter. Aren't we friends? Li Hao asked. Friends, that's right, we're friends. Ling Hao clapped a hand on Li Hao's shoulder. In the past, he had only felt that he wanted to give a hand to Li Hao on his way to great accomplishment, but after the matter today, he had finally accepted Li Hao as a true friend. For his friends, Ling Hao could become completely crazy. Shui, take care of Li Hao. I still have some debts to settle with somebody. Ling Han said darkly. Li Hao had been horribly beaten up, and would at least need about a month to rest and recover from his injuries. Ling Han, do you know what you are doing? The 4 guardian deities all came towards him, speaking loudly, a powerful, threatening air emanating from all of them. They were only flung out of the battle by the impact, but had not suffered any injuries. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and said calmly, you all should feel that you are very lucky that this is the academy. That's why I will only cripple you, but will still leave you with your lives. Insolence, the 4 guardian deities all shouted in unison. This brat was really too outrageously bold. One had to know that although they were flung out of battle with a single move, that was also because they had been too careless, and had underestimated Ling Han's ability. One only had to look at how they were completely unharmed, and would be able to know that they were indeed very powerful martial artists. Let go of young Master Luo, one of the guardian deities said. These 4 guardian deities had been named respectively as Tiger, Elephant, Panther, and Wolf, and the person who had spoken was the Elephant guardian deity. Oh, now that you mention it. I almost forgot. Ling Han smiled. He used a foot to kick at Feng Luo's bottom and said, this is the master of you 4 dogs. Come, kneel down and greet your master. What? The 4 guardian deities glared furiously. He actually wanted them to kneel. What is it? Can't you even kneel down for the sake of your master? Ling Han said calmly as he drew out his sword. Then who knows, if I'm not happy, maybe I would slice off one of his arms in my displeasure. The 4 guardian deities were all shocked. They had naturally not placed any importance on Feng Luo, but Feng Luo was still Feng Yan's brother. They had already received Feng Yan's command to protect and guard Feng Luo. If Feng Luo was crippled right in front of their eyes, how could they be able to face Feng Yan again? Teacher Yang, this brat intends to commit violence in public. I would like to request Teacher Yang to step forwards to stop him, the wolf guardian deity said to the teacher who had been standing at one side and merely watching as things went on. This Teacher Yang was also only in gushing spring tier, but his status was different. The words of a teacher of Huyang Academy would naturally be worth more. Teacher Yang was feeling extremely displeased. Previously, when Feng Luo took advantage of his position to kick Li Hao around and had completely ignored the rules of the academy, he was already very displeased. However, he had received the command to cooperate with Feng Luo in every way he required before he had come, and so could only conceal his displeasure in his heart. When he saw how Ling Han had stomped Feng Luo into the ground, he was actually very pleased, and had secretly praised Ling Han. Yet he never thought that Feng Luo and his accomplices were really too shameless. When it was them breaking the rules, they had pretended he was not present at all, and now that it was others breaking the same rules, they actually pushed him out into this matter. He really did not want to involve himself in this matter, but when he recalled the command he had received earlier on, he could only sigh helplessly and said, Ling Han, it is forbidden to injure others within the academy grounds. Aren't you going to let go of him? When these words were spoken, everyone else instantly erupted in an uproar. What did that mean? Just now, when Feng Luo was going to injure Li Hao grievously, why had he not said such words? Is this still the academy? No, no, no. Is this still the Huyang Academy of Rain Country? Why do I feel as if the academy is now owned by the Feng clan? That's right. Even the imperial princes and princesses have to follow the rules when they are in the academy. Could it be that Feng Yan and Feng Luo are even above the imperial family of Rain Country in status? Heh, I disagree. Me too. They all began to shout loudly. It was Li Hao today, but it could be any of them tomorrow. When there was no restriction enforced on them by the rules, the consequences would be too widespread. Naturally, everyone felt fear and apprehension in face of such a reality. Teacher Yang could not help but become speechless. He had been feeling guilty in the first place, and now, he naturally was unable to present a righteous front. On one side, he had his orders, but on the other, he also had his own ethics to conform to. As his orders and ethics came into a conflict, he finally sighed and said, I am not going to take control of this matter anymore. He directly turned around and left, and was really not planning on getting involved in this issue anymore. The four guardian deities were all ashen, and humphed at his actions. Ling Han, what do you want in order to release young Master Luo? The elephant guardian deity asked. Ling Han merely glanced at him, then said, that's easy. He caused severe injuries to my friend, and even intended to slice off one of his arms. Then I will beat him half dead, and slice off both his arms. That's all. You're going too far, the wolf guardian deity shouted furiously. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, I'm the type of person who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Anyone who breaks one of my fingers, I will break his arm in vengeance. I have only doubled the punishment this time round, so that is already pretty merciful of me. You dare. The four guardian deities all charged towards Ling Han at the same time. They wanted to create a storm of attacks that would make Ling Han not have the chance to make a move on Feng Luo. As long as they managed to rescue Feng Luo. Ling Han was only an element gathering tier, so no matter how strange he was, how far could he go? Ling Han's foot gave a flick, and Feng Luo immediately emerged from the ground. He picked Feng Luo up and waved him around as if he was a weapon to parry the attacks of the four guardian deities. When he used this human weapon, the four guardian deities naturally dared not press their attack any further and quickly stepped back. At this moment, a young man merely in element gathering tier was seen to be greatly showing off his might, forcing four elites of gushing spring tier to retreat pathetically, not daring to parry even a single attack. Despicable. Shameless, the four guardian deities all shouted angrily. Chapter 176, definitely crippling him. When they saw how Ling Han acted like he was shooing away a flock of ducks, the spectators could not help but want to laugh. Wherever he stepped, the four guardian deities would disperse as if they were a flock of birds. The spectators were also secretly amazed at Ling Han's overwhelming courage to actually dare to oppose Feng Yan. Feng Yan had now neatly become the king of the academy. First, when the imperial guards came to the academy to apprehend him, they were forced to retreat in the face of Lian Guangzu's tough attitude, and there was actually no sign of anger from the imperial family. In the end, the matter was simply settled peacefully. Next, Feng Luo, who had been expelled from the academy, returned and even attempted to commit a violent crime right in public. Even a teacher of the academy could only stand by and watch helplessly. This was practically out of control and with completely zero regard for any rules. Not even a core disciple and the son of the emperor like the third imperial prince would dare to act so boldly, yet Feng Yan dared. And now that someone who actually dared to oppose the Feng clan appeared, how could they not all give him a thumbs up and praise him for his courage? Ha 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 ha. The spectators all laughed loudly. They did not dare to so publicly oppose Feng Yan, but a little harmless laughter should be fine. He couldn't possibly hold a grudge over a little laughter, right? The four guardian deities felt angry, enraged, and helpless all at once. In terms of ability, they were sure that they could completely suppress Ling Han, but he had a hostage in his hands, so they could only be cautious in their movements. There was no way for them to put all their efforts in. They could only run around all over the place, and this made them feel unbearably sullen. Ling Han did not treasure the weapon in his hands. He simply crashed, hit, threw, and banged the weapon any which way he liked. Under such treatment, Feng Luo was actually awakened by the pains in his body. Ling Han, he screamed shrilly, an incomparable rage brimming in his tone. How many times was this? That he had experienced a loss at Ling Han's hands? I want you to die. I want you to die, he roared furiously. If he couldn't even vent his anger through an enraged roar, he would go crazy. Oh, you're awake? Ling Han gave a cold, eerie smile, and simply tossed Feng Luo onto the ground. That's good. I want you to watch how your two arms are sliced off. Why you dare? Feng Luo was terrified. Why do I not dare? Ling Han said calmly. Just now, you wanted to slice off my friend's arm, and now I can't slice off your arm? Or is it that you think that I can't even compare to an idiot like you? My brother would definitely not spare you. Feng Luo caught onto the last sliver of hope for him threatening Ling Han with his brother. You speak as if your brother would become my underling once I let you go. Ling Han shook his head, and waved his sword a bit. Cherish the moment now and gaze for a moment longer at your two arms, as very quickly, you will be saying an eternal farewell to them. No. 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 Feng Luo was finally so terrified that he had started to cry with snot and tears. He did not want to become a handicap. He was still young, and if he lost his arms, how would he be able to bully others or play with beautiful women in the future? Stop, the four guardian deities all shouted in unison. No one would be able to save him. Ling Han shook his head, his voice cold as ice. Oh, then what about me? A voice filled with dignity rang out and Feng Yan appeared. He had his hands behind his back as if he were an emperor, and was exuding a powerful aura of domination. My lord, the four guardian deities all fell into a half-kneeling position, respectfully paying their greetings. Brother, save me. Save me. Feng Luo was both surprised and delighted. In his eyes, there was nothing that Feng Yan could not do. As long as his brother was here, he would be saved. And who do you think you are? Ling Han asked calmly. There was no hint of disdain in his tone, as if he was merely stating a very ordinary statement of truth. Feng Yan could not help as killing intent rose within him, but when his eyes swept over Feng Luo, he said, "Let go of my brother, and I can spare you this one time." You speak as if you have some kind of special status. Ling Han snorted. Since you two brothers are finally both here, then I can get started. He raised his sword. What? He had not acted before, because he was deliberately waiting for Feng Yan to appear. This was really too arrogant of him, wasn't it? Deliberately waiting for Feng Yan to appear to make his move. Was he trying to form a life-or-death enmity with Feng Yan? What the others did not know was that these two young men already had a life-or-death enmity between them. However, in Feng Yan's eyes, he could very easily erase Ling Han's existence from this world, and did not take it seriously at all. Brother! Brother! Feng Luo maniacally struggled and cried out, crying so much that his face was covered with snot and tears. In the end, Feng Yan was moved, and said, "If you dare, then I will definitely kill you today." Both sides were similarly ruthless. One side wanted to slice off the arms of someone, while the other side declared loudly the intention to commit murder. It was as if neither of them took the rules of the academy or the laws of Rain Country to heart. Idiot! Ling Han said coldly, and his sword lowered swiftly in a strike. You are seeking death. Feng Yan shot towards Ling Han. With his ability, he at least had a 70% chance of blocking Ling Han's sword strike successfully. Xiao, he was indeed very fast, as if he was a furious arrow. Just when Ling Han's sword was about to fall onto Feng Luo's shoulder, Feng Yan's hand struck forwards as well. Origin power rolled out and wrapped around his palm, making his whole arm turn white silver, brilliantly lit. Ling Han humphed and flicked his left hand. Instantly, strange fire wrapped around his fist, which struck towards Feng Yan. Immediately, Feng Yan's expression changed. He could sense that the flames wrapped around Ling Han's fist had the ability to threaten his life. Though this was only a feeling, he believed very strongly in his feelings, as they had helped him survive many dangers and hazards previously. At this moment, he fully displayed his extraordinary prowess. He suddenly struck a fist onto the ground and unbelievably stopped in his advance due to the opposing force of the solid ground. Then he quickly stepped back in retreat. Ling Han's fist could only hit empty air. However, though Feng Yan could dodge and retreat, Feng Luo could not. Pooh! Blood spilled and Feng Luo released a terrible scream. His right arm was completely sliced off. He really sliced it off. He really did. Everyone was shocked. The Feng clan brothers were already more than out of control, but Ling Han was not the least bit inferior to them. He actually did slice off Feng Luo's arm with a strike of his sword. Ah! Ah! The area was dead silent, except for Feng Luo's terrible screams of agony, resounding around. Feng Yan's face turned completely ashen, and he said darkly, "You have successfully enraged me. Today, there is no other fate for you but death." You're angry just with this?" Ling Han asked calmly. "I still have one arm left to slice." Hiss, this guy really planned to cripple both of Feng Yan's arms. It was as if two solidified bursts of killing intent were suddenly shot from Feng Yan's eyes. When he looked at Ling Han, it was as if he wanted to stare a hole into him. He said, "If you dare to touch another hair on my brother's head, I will kill all your clansmen and everyone related to you." Shua, Ling Han's sword once again lowered, giving Feng Yan the most direct, as well as the most unyielding answer. Fuck. Feng Yan could not stop himself from cursing. He once again shot forwards, but he dared not come too closely this time round. Instead, he punched a fist forwards, and his origin power suddenly solidified into a few tens of silver fists that transformed into a powerful barrage of blows heading in Ling Han's direction. Black grade low-level martial arts technique, torrential fists. The ability of an elite in the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier added together with the power upgrade of a black grade low-level martial arts technique was definitely not something that a weaker martial artist of Gushing Spring tier could stand against, no matter what kind of monster he was. The fists would strike violently and randomly, as if they were drops of rain falling in a torrential rainstorm. How could this be blocked? Ling Han's right hand held onto his sword in a stance, but his left hand stretched open. A black-colored thing spread open, as if it was an umbrella, and when it was fully spread out, it transformed into a circular object very similar to a shield that completely protected Ling Han behind it. Blood-sucking origin gold, an item that could transform according to his will. Chapter 177, The Eldest Imperial Prince has arrived. Peng, 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 peng. Feng Yan's fists crashed into the blood-sucking origin gold and actually created flashes of silver light upon impact. That was the origin power of the fists being shattered and once again transforming back into spiritual qi. With Feng Yan's current ability, he was not yet able to break through the shield of blood-sucking origin gold, but he was indeed much more powerful than Ling Han. The extremely powerful impacts were like rolling waves that crashed into the shield repeatedly, forcing Ling Han to retreat uncontrollably again and again. When he saw the blade of his sword was getting farther and farther away from Feng Luo's shoulder, Ling Han gave a cold humph, and 6 flashes of sword qi swept forwards at the same time. Pooh! Feng Luo's left arm was also unable to escape from the fate of being sliced off. Ah! Feng Luo had fainted from the agony of his right arm being sliced off, but this strike actually caused him enough pain to wake him from his unconscious state. Ling Han quickly shot back in a retreat, and drew back his left hand. The blood-sucking origin gold once again transformed back into a bangle that encircled his wrist. He looked a bit pale. After all, even with his body of dead tree ability, suffering such a round of powerful attacks caused him to feel as if his body was boiling, so he was in a lot of pain. The area was once again in dead silence. Upon the first glance, Feng Yan was naturally at the advantage in their clash, being able to force Ling Han to retreat simply by punching a fist at empty air. However, Ling Han had still managed to slice off Feng Luo's other arm with a single strike and retreat completely unscathed, so it also looked like it was his victory. Awesome, he was really too awesome. Not just having power, but also courage. Feng Yan's face was filled with a powerful killing intent that transformed into a solid state encircling around his body. His younger brother had both his arms crippled right in front of his eyes. This caused killing intent to blaze within him. He really had to kill Ling Han. Would definitely not let this matter go. Your previous actions have completely forfeited your own life, he said with a wooden, expressionless face. As he walked towards Ling Han, his right hand gave a wave and drew out the long saber from his waist. It was eerily cold like autumn waters, and was obviously an amazing weapon. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "You have already moved twice, and I'm still standing here completely unharmed. Your ability only goes so far." Although that's what he said, he dared not underestimate Feng Yan in the slightest. After all, when he added together the different cultivation levels of both him and Feng Yan, they actually had a gap of 7 whole layers. "Today, no one will be able to save you," Feng Yan declared coldly. Every step he took created a heavy sound, and it was as if his steps were falling on their hearts, making everyone feel very uncomfortable. "Oh, has this rain country changed surnames to Feng?" A clear voice rang out, and a tall man walked over. He looked to be about 30 years old, and was quite handsome. He was dressed in a crimson embroidered robe, and walked with a majestic gait, possessing the aura of a king. About a meter behind this man was a plain-looking middle-aged man, who followed his steps closely. Eldest Imperial Prince. It's the eldest Imperial Prince. Why is the eldest Imperial Prince suddenly here? Didn't he leave the academy 2 years ago? Coincidence? This is getting fun now. Feng Yan completely takes himself to be the boss of the academy, but the eldest Imperial Prince is the real owner here. Is this a sign that these two are about to come into conflict? No matter how awesome Feng Yan is, he would not dare to oppose the eldest Imperial Prince publicly, would he? Not necessarily. Just take a look at Feng Luo's previous arrogant display and look at how Feng Yan wants to commit murder in broad daylight. They have obviously no regard for the Emperor's laws at all. Let's just wait and see. The spectators all started murmuring their thoughts and ideas to each other. Now that things had come this far, it was already a bit out of control. Even the eldest Imperial Prince had come to involve himself in the matter. "Feng Yan, why are you not paying your greetings when you see the eldest Imperial Prince?" the middle-aged man behind the eldest Imperial Prince rebuked coldly. Feng Yan slightly hesitated for a moment, then raised his clasped hands in the eldest Imperial Prince's direction and said, "Feng Yan hereby greets your Imperial Highness, the eldest Imperial Prince." How arrogant, he actually only raised his clasped hands in greeting. The middle-aged man was about to speak up and reprimand again when he saw the eldest Imperial Prince stretch out an arm, which forced the former to swallow whatever words he was about to say. "Feng Yan, step back," the eldest Imperial Prince said. "This man has crippled both my brother's arms and I'm going to take his life in return," Feng Yan said in a calm tone after regaining control over his emotions. However, although he spoke calmly, there was a determination that lay behind his words that said he would not be refused. The eldest Imperial Prince could not help but look displeased. With his status, in the whole Rain Country, aside from the clan heads of the 8 great clans of Rain Country, Lian Guangzhu, Wu Songlin and the other rare few at the same level, who would dare to not give him face. Feng Yan, you have overstepped your bounds, the eldest imperial prince said coldly. Though he was not the emperor yet, at a certain level, he could represent the imperial family. Any words he said had enormous weight behind them, so how could his words simply be refused like that? Hang, he crippled my brother, and I will take his life in exchange. Isn't this fair? Feng Yan displayed his overbearing and unreasonable nature, actually not giving the slightest face to the eldest imperial prince at all. Feng Yan, do you have any idea what you are doing now? The eldest imperial prince asked. He was also angered by now. Any lands under the skies were all under imperial authority. Who would dare to disobey the words of the emperor? I have long heard that the eldest imperial prince was a core disciple of Huyang Academy in the previous generation. Please allow this Feng Yan to experience your ability, Feng Yan said. The area erupted in an uproar. Feng Yan actually pitted himself against the eldest imperial prince. Putting aside the eldest imperial prince's status, when he left the academy 2 years ago, he was a core disciple. Though he had yet to break through to spiritual ocean tier now, he was definitely in the 9th layer of gushing spring tier, and added together with the eldest imperial prince's talent in martial arts, he was practically invincible in the gushing spring tier. In the current Huyang Academy, the 3rd imperial prince was considered the most powerful student, but he was only in the 7th layer of gushing spring tier, and even he would most likely lose against the eldest imperial prince. Feng Yan was only a true disciple, so where did he get the courage and confidence to think that he was worthy of opposing the 3rd imperial prince? The eldest imperial prince could not help but grow even angrier. This Feng Yan not only dared to disobey his commands, he even wanted to challenge him. He was indeed outrageously bold. However, as the eldest imperial prince, he was a very subtle person and so would naturally not show any sign of his emotions on his face as he asked calmly, "You really want to challenge me?" "Please." Feng Yan said very decisively. The aura from his whole body came out in a wave, emanating a powerful might. 7th layer of gushing spring tier. The eldest imperial prince could not help but look astonished. How had Feng Yan risen to such a formidable height in such a short period of time? What, 7th layer of gushing spring tier, really? Since the eldest imperial prince has said so, then it is most likely true. No wonder he actually dared to challenge the eldest imperial prince, so he is in the 7th layer of gushing spring tier. That's not right. Even if he is in spiritual ocean tier, so what? That's the eldest imperial prince there. That's true. I really don't know what backer Feng Yan has. Could it be he really is the illegitimate son of the headmaster? All of the spectators were exclaiming in surprise. That was the 7th layer of gushing spring tier, and Feng Yan had actually caught up with the 3rd imperial prince, but when one took into account Feng Yan's young age, he could definitely be considered as the most talented and strongest genius of Rain Country. No wonder he dared to challenge me. The eldest imperial prince's expression darkened, and he said, "Then, make your move." Without any reservation, Feng Yan leaped forwards in the eldest imperial prince's direction. He did not use his saber, but simply used his fists to create a barrage of attacks. There was a layer of silvery light wrapped around his fists, which exuded an unusually powerful aura. Using fists in front of me? The eldest imperial prince humphed and a cold light flashed through his eyes. He similarly attacked with his fists. It was as if an emperor had arrived, which caused an irrepressible pounding to rise up in everyone's hearts. They all felt the urge to kneel down on the ground and declare themselves to be loyal subjects of the eldest imperial prince. Son of Heaven fist technique. Peng, 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 peng. The two of them clashed endlessly, and the eldest imperial prince visibly had the upper hand. His cultivation level was higher, he had greater power, and the Son of Heaven fist technique dominated over Feng Yan's own martial arts technique in terms of grade. If he was still unable to gain the advantage in the clash with all these factors in play, then it was really illogical. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly, and when he looked upon the silvery light exuding from Feng Yan, he murmured to himself, "Special physical constitution?" Chapter 178, Mirror Light Body. This had to be a special physical constitution, Ling Han said decisively in his mind. If it was not due to his special physical constitution, Feng Yan would have been blasted to pieces by the eldest imperial prince by now. Though Feng Yan was at a disadvantage in their clash, he was still composed and calm. When he defended himself, he would also press forwards in attack, and every move contained a great explosive burst of power behind it. What special physical constitution could that be? Ling Han was observing very closely. The reason why special physical constitutions could be described as special was naturally because they had certain characteristics that made them special and unique. For example, Zhu Wujiao could recover from his wounds very rapidly, Hu Niu could transform whatever food she consumed into her own reserves of origin power, and he, with his acquired special physical constitution, could greatly increase his defenses, and like a dead tree, would feel nothing even when he suffered serious injury, not allowing the pain to affect him, and continue to display his battle prowess to the fullest. So what special characteristic did Feng Yan have, then? Hong. Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince endlessly clashed, and there was only brute force behind every fist, without any hint of technique. As the power behind their fists clashed against each other, the impact actually created a power wave that was visible to the naked eye, and this shockwave was spreading out in all directions, forcing the spectators to step back and retreat continuously. Ling Han had noticed that Feng Yan's complexion was becoming more and more brightly white, and this was definitely not due to the use of origin power. It seemed more like that was the real color of his complexion. Could it be mirror light body? He mumbled. Though he was still dubious, it was almost confirmed for him. The owner of mirror light body had the ability to reflect any attacks he suffered, as if he himself was a mirror reflecting light. However, even a special physical constitution could be split up into different categories based on the purity of the bloodline. Thus, there were roughly 3 categories for mirror light body. Weakest of all was the bronze mirror body, which could only reflect about 10% of every attack, and the next strongest was silver mirror body, which could increase the rate of reflection to 20%, while the strongest, the gold mirror body, could reflect about 30% of every attack. Don't underestimate the 10 to 30% of attack that could be reflected. It not only would decrease the power behind an opponent's attack, it could even become one's own power that could be aimed back at your opponent. In a simpler example, at first, it was 10 points of attack power against 10 points of attack power. Then, even if it had only become 9 points against 11 points, the gap would have increased by 20%, what more when it was 7 points against 13. That was practically a 100% gap in power. From the looks of Feng Yan, he should have a silver mirror body, and was able to reflect about 20% of the attacks. It was exactly this 20% of power reflected back that compensated for the difference of 2 layers in cultivation level behind Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince. As a result, though Feng Yan was still at an obvious disadvantage, he was not defeated. That's not right. Ling Han shook his head. The 20% of power could possibly compensate for the difference in cultivation levels, but could not compensate for the inferiority of Feng Yan's martial arts technique as compared to the eldest imperial prince's son of heaven fist technique, which most likely should have reached black grade high level. It was not that this fist technique was of a high grade by itself, but with the installation of power of the nation, it could have might that could compare to a black grade high level martial arts technique. Since Feng Yan was able to stand against the son of heaven fist technique with a mere black grade low level martial arts technique, then he must definitely have had some other ability. Otherwise, he would at least have to be on the same cultivation level as his opponent, and depend on the mirror light body to compensate for the gap in their respective martial arts techniques. What could it be? Ling Han could not help but become curious. The eldest imperial prince's battle prowess was outstanding. Though he had been stuck on this 9th layer of gushing spring tear for quite some years, it had also allowed him to fortify his foundations on this cultivation level to an unbearably sturdy level. His current battle prowess should be worth about 12 battle stars. And it was obvious that neither side had played their trump cards yet. At least, both these young men had formed chi, but neither of them had used it yet. If qi was taken into consideration, then their battle prowess could obviously increase further. The spectators were all watching dumbfounded. The eldest imperial prince was in the 9th layer of gushing spring tier and was a core disciple in his time, yet Feng Yan could actually manage to not fall in a clash with him. This guy was really too strong. The 3rd imperial prince, Zhao Huan, Qin Yi, the current generation of core disciples, most likely were no longer able to match Feng Yan anymore, right? Though they were on opposing sides, Ling Han could strongly agree that Feng Yan was indeed powerful. This guy was indeed a genius of martial arts, not only having mysterious means but also a terrifyingly strong understanding of battle, and as he continued to watch, he would often nod in approval. Feng Yan just barely made the cut to being worthy enough to be trampled by him. The eldest imperial prince was like an emperor, while Feng Yan was like a demon god who freely displayed his domineering attitude, unreasonable and insolent. However, the two of them managed to keep their clash on even standing. In the condition when neither side was willing to play more of their trump cards, the battle had come to a deadlock. Stop! An old voice rang out, though this voice held within it incomparable might. Feng Yan and the eldest imperial prince both stopped attacking, though they still looked at each other fiercely, their battle spirit still high, as if wanting to continue battling to their heart's content. Lian Guangzhu appeared, and the aura of an elite of spiritual pedestal tier spread out, causing everyone to feel as if there was a gigantic rock pressing down on their hearts. They could feel that their feet were strangely heavy and an urge to kneel down. He took one look at Ling Han, shook his head, and said, "Little fellow, you really know how to make trouble." Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "Headmaster, it's not that I am really good at making trouble, but this blind fool actually came to look for trouble purposely with me. Thus, I could only slice him up a bit to give him a lesson. But I am still very merciful, and did not take his life." He was a little curious. Previously, Lian Guangzhu was obviously very optimistic about his martial arts talent, and looked practically like he wanted to cultivate Ling Han like a disciple, yet there had suddenly been no news from him at all, and now there was obviously a drastic change in attitude from him. What a sharp mouth that is skilled at overturning facts. Do you think everyone is an idiot? You crippled my brother's arms, and this is already a breach of academy regulations. According to the rules, you should be killed for your crime. Feng Yan said darkly. Feng Yan, though I have just come here, and did not see the start and finish of this whole matter clearly, but it seems as if it was your brother who had threatened to slice someone else's arm first, right? The eldest imperial prince interrupted. Since you did not see clearly the start and the end of the matter, then shut up. Feng Yan cast a cold glance at the eldest imperial prince. Pooh! Everyone was shocked speechless. Did Feng Yan actually reprimand the eldest imperial prince? A younger member of a minor clan actually dared to openly reprimand the eldest son of the current reign emperor. What kind of outrageously bold act was that? Immediately, the eldest imperial prince's face turned ashen, and a powerful killing intent was brimming in his eyes. As the saying goes, when the emperor goes into a rage, blood could flow over 10,000 miles. Though he was not the emperor yet, as the eldest imperial prince, he was still very powerful and mighty. You didn't see the start and the end of the matter either, so what are you blabbering so excitedly about? Ling Han opened his mouth and said to Feng Yan in castigation. All right, this was an awesome guy too. Everyone else felt like they were about to lose their minds. Whether it was Ling Han or Feng Yan, where had they gotten such strong confidence to dare to create such a commotion? Headmaster, please apprehend Ling Han and hand him over to me to be dealt with. Feng Yan turned and said to Lian Guangzhu. Though his words were polite, it seemed as if he was requesting Lian Guangzhu to do as he requested. To make a request of an elite of spiritual pedestal tier, and someone who held the revered position of headmaster of the martial arts department? The others were all in disbelief. Though Feng Yan had offended the eldest imperial prince previously, the latter was still in gushing spring tier, after all. In this world where the most important thing was martial arts ability, the eldest imperial prince was far from being able to compare to Lian Guangzhu in terms of status. Lian Guangzhu's status was only below the current Rain Emperor in Rain Country, and was able to stand on even ground with the clan heads of the 8 great clans. Commanding Lian Guangzhu. The others could not help but gather a layer of cold sweat on their bodies. Headmaster, the eldest imperial prince interrupted, looking at Lian Guangzhu. Lian Guangzhu sighed, and said, "Please do not interfere in this matter, eldest imperial prince." What? When they heard his words, did that mean the Lian Guangzhu was going to obey Feng Yan's command? Old man Lian, if it was me who wanted to interfere, are you planning to stop me too? Wu Songlin appeared, looking coldly at Lian Guangzhu. Hiss, here comes another big boss, everyone thought. Chapter 179, Olive Branch. Old man Wu, don't interfere with this matter. Lian Guangzhu waved his hand. I do not want to spoil our many years of friendship. Nonsense. Wu Songlin instantly rebuked. This brat has, after all, dealt someone a crippling injury, so he must definitely be punished according to the academy regulations. Lian Guangzhu's attitude also became unyielding. Wasn't it just crippling a piece of trash? Wu Songlin dismissed lightly. Master Wu, please speak cautiously. Feng Yan interrupted, actually carrying a hint of threat in his tone. Who do you think you are that you dare to reprimand me? Wu Songlin humphed, his right hand flashing out in a strike towards Feng Yan. He was an elite of spiritual pedestal tier, so though this strike was only a very casual move, it held within it unbelievable power. Origin power transformed into a gigantic hand that flew towards Feng Yan. Pung! Lian Guangzhu moved in the nick of time, and managed to disperse the power behind Wu Songlin's blow. He frowned, and said, Old man Wu, are you intending to go against me? As long as you don't touch him, I naturally would not bother to fight you either. Wu Songlin took one step back. Lian Guangzhu stared at Wu Songlin, and Wu Songlin also stared at him. 2 old men, whose ages added together came up to a total of over 150 years, were thus stuck in a glaring contest with each other. All right, old man Wu, I'll give you face this time. Lian Guangzhu nodded. Headmaster. Feng Yan spoke up, displeased. Bring your brother with you, let's go and see if we can still manage to reattach his arms. Lian Guangzhu frowned in slight impatience. Feng Yan did not dare to say anything else. He simply picked up Feng Luo and followed at the heels of Lian Guangzhu. One pair of the 4 great guardian deities each carried one of Feng Luo's arms, and the party left together. A chaotic conflict thus ended in this manner. Wu Songlin gave Ling Han a light nod, and left directly. There were too many people here, so he did not want to reveal the relationship between himself and Ling Han. He only wanted to let them know that Ling Han was under his protection, and that was enough. Brother Ling, if you do not mind, why not join me for a cup of tea? The eldest imperial prince said to Ling Han, smiling. Ling Han smiled, and said, Many thanks for your help just now, your imperial highness. This Ling Han is extremely grateful. Please. Please. The 2 of them left together, and when he passed by Li Hao and Zhu Shui, Ling Han said, The 2 of you go to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and seek out Yuan Chu. Just tell him that it was I who told the 2 of you to go, and stay at his place for a while. Thank you, big brother Ling. Li Hao and Zhu Shui said, filled with gratitude. Ling Han nodded. The reason why the 2 of them had been targeted by Feng Luo was because of him after all, so he would definitely not just stand by and watch as they continue to be victimized. The eldest imperial prince brought Ling Han with him to a tea shop and requested for an elegant room. The middle-aged man naturally stood guard outside the door, and only Ling Han and the eldest imperial prince were seated inside. I heard that Brother Ling is very friendly with various grandmaster alchemists, and from what I witnessed today, that is indeed the case, the eldest imperial prince said. His eyes were slightly guarded, and there was also a sliver of heat in his gaze. Ling Han knew very well that the third imperial prince had, thanks to him, welcomed quite a few of previously hesitating neutral parties into his camp. As a result, the eldest imperial prince could naturally not stay composed in the face of this, and similarly extended an olive branch towards him. Before this, alchemists would never interfere in the competition for the throne as they stood completely above it. However, with Ling Han's appearance, many different unpredictable variables were all of a sudden added into the balance. If any imperial prince managed to gain Ling Han's support, that would be equivalent to gaining the support of the alchemists of Rain Country. This was an incomparably terrifying power, and even if the current Rain Emperor wanted to pass on his throne, he would have to consider things carefully. After all, this could possibly disturb the roots of the empire. Thus, the eldest imperial prince also hoped to maintain a good relationship with Ling Han. Additionally, Wu Songlin's previous attitude also reaffirmed this idea in his mind. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Does the eldest imperial prince know what means that Feng Yan has obtained that even Headmaster Lien would be so partial towards him?" The eldest imperial prince frowned, and revealed a furious expression. He could not help but smack a hand on the table, and said, "That traitor." He might not hate Feng Yan so much, but it was obvious that Feng Yan and Ling Han were deadly foes. Thus, he naturally would not mind presenting a slightly exaggerated front in order to form a closer relationship with Ling Han. This man has a special physical constitution, and is also very powerful in battle. However, if it was just that, he could only at most obtain Lien Guanzu's recognition, but would definitely not be able to command the latter. But from the looks of Feng Yan's attitude, though he looks respectful on the surface, in truth, it seems as if he is Lien Guangzu's superior. "This is indeed strange," Ling Han murmured. The eldest imperial prince sank into a pensive state as well. What power had Feng Yan obtained that could actually cause an elite of spiritual pedestal tiara highly revered old headmaster at Thado practically obey his commands? As the eldest imperial prince of Rain Country, he actually had no idea about any of this, and this caused a kind of unease to rise up in him. "I will begin investigating this matter," the eldest imperial prince said, then looked towards Ling Han and continued with a serious expression, "Brother Ling is a smart man, so I will not beat around the bush and waste time." "What do you want to say, Your Imperial Highness?" Ling Han said with a slight smile, though he already knew why the eldest imperial prince had paid him this visit. "I would like to ask you to assist me to ascend to the throne," the eldest imperial prince said. Suddenly, the aura of a ruler exuded from him, and his eyes shone with a powerful light. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "What ability do I have that I could actually help Your Imperial Highness ascend to the throne?" "Ha ha ha, Brother Ling, you are being too modest." The eldest imperial prince laughed loudly before he suddenly changed the topic. "If I successfully ascend to the throne, the Ling clan would be a loyal subject that has performed an outstanding service for me. I would be able to name you a king." King. If these words were heard by the members of the court, they would definitely be shocked numb by the weight of this promise. In the history of Rain Country, there had never been anyone who had rendered such outstanding service that they would be named as a king, even if they were not members of the Qi family. For royal subjects, this could be considered as the highest honor they could attain in their lifetimes. As a result, the eldest imperial prince's face was filled with expectation. He believed that Ling Han would immediately agree. However, he was very quickly disappointed, as there was no hint of change in Ling Han's expression at all. His eyes were clear and deep, as if great imperial power was only a fleeting scene in his eyes. Ling Han slowly opened his mouth, and said, "I do not have any bit of interest in power." In his last life, he had been one of the strongest existences in this world after all, what more when he had also been the Alchemy Emperor? How could a mere mortal emperor compare to the power he had in his grasp at the time? In this lifetime, he only had one target, and that was to become a Grand Master of martial arts, shatter the void, break through his mortal chains and become a god. The eldest imperial prince was actually a very good speaker, but now he suddenly felt a kind of awkwardness that came from not knowing how to continue the conversation. This was because he had already revealed his best trump card, yet Ling Han did not even spare him any consideration. Could it be that he had to yield the imperial throne itself to Ling Han? That has got to be a joke. He considered for a moment and said, Brother Ling, if I manage to ascend to the throne, I will allow you to have the chance to break through to flower blossoming tier. Ling Han could not help but put on a strange expression, casting a look at the eldest imperial prince. In Rain Country, due to the restrictions placed on martial arts and cultivation techniques, no matter how highly talented one was, they would still be unable to break through to flower blossoming tier. Thus, this oath of the eldest imperial prince could be considered to be unbelievably shocking. Even the elders of the 8 great clans would most likely be moved by this promise. However, for Ling Han, what was so difficult about breaking through to flower blossoming tier? He was an elite of heaven tier in his last life. Though I am not sure about the exact details, but it should have some relation with power of the nation, right? Ling Han was indeed quite curious, and asked the eldest imperial prince with a raised brow. The eldest imperial prince was instantly struck dumb. Chapter 180, Eye of Truth. The power of the nation could help an elite of spiritual pedestal tier break through to flower blossoming tier. Such a huge secret was only discovered by the eldest imperial prince under the most coincidental of circumstances. Moreover, this was not the actual flower blossoming tier, as it required the continuous installation of power of the nation to allow one to maintain his cultivation of flower blossoming tier. Otherwise, one would very quickly once again fall back to the mortal plane. It was precisely because of this that there existed only a single elite warrior of flower blossoming tier in the whole of Rain Country. When the eldest imperial prince set out this condition, he was actually being a little untruthful. When he ascended the throne, he would definitely stimulate the power of the nation for Ling Han's use, but the length of the period that Ling Han could access it, that was a different story. After all, by that time, he would be the new Rain Emperor, and have gained control over the entire empire and immeasurable power. Who would dare go against him, or object to his actions? He had never thought that Ling Han seemed to have a deeper understanding of the power of the nation than even him, and Ling Han obviously did not place much importance on it either. He could not help but be flabbergasted. Women, wealth, and power, all of these were unwanted. He could still understand that, but that even the possibility of breaking through to flower blossoming tier could be set aside so easily as if it was something common. He was really at a loss by now. Such a man seemed to have completely no wants or desires, and as the saying went, a man without wants could stay firm in his resolution. What else could he offer that would successfully attract Ling Han to support him? Ling Han smiled and said, "In truth, I am only friends with the 3rd imperial prince, and have never become his subordinate. I can also become friends with your imperial highness. I have no desire for power, and have no intention to interfere in a struggle for power either." The eldest imperial prince finally looked better at this. He frowned slightly, considered for a while, then spoke. "Does young Master Han have any interest in mystical power?" Previously, he had already taken Ling Han to be a profligate spoilt young master who had somehow managed to obtain the favor of a considerable number of alchemists just like Feng Yan, who had some kind of unknown background. As a result, though he still placed a lot of importance on maintaining an amiable relation with Ling Han, it was a different story whether he truly respected Ling Han or not in his heart. However, through this conversation with Ling Han, he did not dare underestimate this young man who was only 16 or 17 years old any longer, and unconsciously began to use a respectful address for Ling Han. Ling Han was surprised, and asked, "Mystical power?" "That's right, mystical power." The eldest imperial prince nodded, and began to explain, "Mystical powers are extremely unique. Some mystical powers could wound your enemies and possess formidable power. Some mystical powers could only assist and support you in battle. Some claim them to be a kind of martial arts technique, yet they will not expend your origin power. However, every kind of mystical power is extremely precious, and could never be obtained even with a large amount of wealth." Ling Han naturally knew what mystical powers were. These techniques were extremely rare. Even he in his last life had not witnessed the use of mystical powers too many times. However, from the few times that he had seen them in action, they had left behind a very powerful impression on his memory. When he ventured deep into various historical sites, he encountered a kind of special physical constitution that could use a mystical power that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth. The user was obviously only in deity transformation tier, yet still managed to swallow him into his stomach, and he was almost digested. Though the holder of this special physical institution was later eliminated by Ling Han, if he was to be honest, then if both of them were at the same cultivation level, even if Ling Han was in the 9th layer and his opponent was merely in the first, the conclusion of their battle could possibly be completely different. Unfortunately, he had not managed to pry the origins of this mystical power from the mouth of that enemy of his. Ling Han's interest was stirred, and he asked, "From the words of your Imperial Highness, you apparently possess a mystical power then?" "I do not, but the National Treasury does," the eldest Imperial Prince said with a serious expression. "As long as young Master Han helps me ascend to the throne, I will definitely hand over this mystical power over to you." Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Your Imperial Highness is not being very sincere. If you can manage to bring this mystical power and show it to me within these few days, I can consider your offer. The mystical power is much too precious, and is locked within the inner chambers. Even I am unable to enter within, so how am I supposed to bring it out for you?" the eldest Imperial Prince said with a little frustration. Ling Han had obtained a useful piece of information, and that was that the National Treasury had an inner chamber within. He laughed, and said, "Then what is the effect of this mystical power? Your Imperial Highness should at least know this, right?" "Eye of Truth," the eldest Imperial Prince said, looking a bit guilty. He had never cultivated this mystical power before, but knew that the Eye of Truth would not increase one's battle prowess in any way, and could only help one to see through false illusions. In his opinion, what use was there for this ability? Thus, he was naturally a bit guilty. But no matter how lousy a mystical power it was still a mystical power. That was why he dared to offer it to tempt Ling Han to support him. Ling Han was stunned for a moment before ecstasy rose up in his heart. The Eye of Truth indeed did not possess any ability to damage or harm one's opponent. However, it was even more precious than a lot of other mystical powers that had ability to attack, because it would allow one to see through all kinds of false illusions and see the real truth. In a simpler example, after cultivating the Eye of Truth, he need not fear any kinds of illusionary arts nor deceptions. And what was even more terrifying was the fact that the Eye of Truth would allow him to see the weaknesses of both himself and his opponent. Being able to see the weaknesses of others would allow him to maximize his attacks to the full extent, while being able to see his own weaknesses would allow him to improve upon them. Even if there was no way he could improve his weaknesses, he would still be able to protect these weak points of his better. Ling Han did not know whether there was any even stronger ability to this mystical power or not. After all, he had only heard of this kind of mystical power and had never seen it before in his last life. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that, in this tiny little rain country, there would actually be hidden such a powerful mystical power? Ling Han thought for a moment. He had indeed discovered a considerable number of precious treasures in Rain Country, such as the remains of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier. Perhaps when so many elites and ultimate warriors had gathered all those years ago, there had been a few that had only suffered heavy injuries but had not died. After the battle, they stayed in Rain Country, and left behind such a powerful mystical power like the Eye of Truth. Ling Han was moved in his heart, but there was no hint of change in his expression. How could he so easily wear his heart on his sleeve after 2 whole lifetimes won? He asked, "Your Imperial Highness does not seem to have cultivated this mystical power? Otherwise, he may not take it out as a bargaining chip." The eldest Imperial Prince shook his head and said, "The Eye of Truth has a very special condition for inheritance. It is hidden in an eyeball, and one must somehow gain its acceptance and acknowledgement before it would directly enter into one's consciousness. Otherwise, it is only a piece of scrap." Ling Han gave an "oh" at this. No wonder he had not managed to find the mystical power, swallow the heavens and devour the earth. So this kind of inheritance was completely different from cultivation techniques and martial arts, and was not depicted in mere words or pictures. Intriguing. He smiled and said, "When your Imperial Highness can bring that eyeball to me, we can continue to discuss our cooperation. But, as for now, let's just be friends, all right?" The eldest Imperial Prince knew very well that empty promises would not be able to move Ling Han whatever he could promise, so could the third Imperial Prince, which meant he had no advantage over the latter. However, he had at least managed to befriend Ling Han, so other matters could be advanced slowly. "Young Master Han, there will be an auction at the Spirit Treasures Pavilion the day after tomorrow, and it is rumored that there will even be an incomparably precious foundation building pill up for auction. Are you interested to go take a look?" the eldest Imperial Prince earnestly inquired him. Ling Han could not help but put on a strange expression. This foundation building pill was naturally his, but he had never thought that it would actually become the most precious of auction items. He was just about to shake his head in refusal, but then reconsidered. Rain Country's overall level was too low. Who knows if there may be some treasures that may not be recognized for their worth. "I don't mind going for a look." He changed his mind. "Ha ha ha ha, then I shall come receive you personally the day after tomorrow." The eldest Imperial Prince was very satisfied. If he appeared in public with Ling Han, then that would definitely create an image that he had a very close relationship with Ling Han. By that time, those middle-class clans would have to reconsider their decisions. Ling Han nodded and took his leave. He still had to go and visit Li Hao and Zhu Shui. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.